good, fam? Happy Friday, and welcome to the Tip-Off, the show that sets the stage for the most important news, daily fantasy plays, and bets on tonight's 13-game MLB slate, 2-game NBA slate, playoff slate, and Euro 2020. You heard that right. I am your host, Kayla Knierim. My favorite music was back. Thanks, Tyler. Love that. Joining me today, we've got Dr. Ben Rasa in the house and Chris Spags. Guys, we're going to have a good Friday. How we doing?
I'm excited here. We got the crew back for once again after I had to watch Ayton cuck me once again in the tip-off on Thursdays in my former slot. But no, it's exciting to be here, exciting to be closing out the Monday to Friday week. And I feel like we got some great things to talk about. I'm personally curious here about Euro 2020. It's all the rage right now. We're selling projections for it and all of that. And a lot of people apparently talking about it on social media. So hopefully Dr. Ben can lead us as newbies on the right track.
I don't know about that. We're going to try, though. I do love betting some soccer. It's a great sports day. We've got an all-time tennis match going on. We've got plenty of NBA to talk about. I just finished for our man El Negro Loco in the chat. I just finished Snowfall off his recommendation, a show we talked about on the show like a month ago now. Yes. I watched it. Very, very good. I am in the corner of definitely recommending it.
What's it about?
It's about drugs. People threw out The Wire. I think that's a stretch in some regard, but it reminded me of Breaking Bad a little bit. So very, very good nonetheless.
And what's it on?
FX.
Noted. Spags, have you seen it?
I have not. I've heard it's good. We just finished Hacks, the HBO Max show that didn't watch the first few episodes, but that's one I think that's popular in the lady community about a female comedian and a young lady writer who's working for her. And that's actually pretty good. Like I don't hate it, but haven't really had my attention grabbed in anything besides me getting a Top Shot pack right now, which I will not open on the show. I'm going to save that till after the show. Cherish it like dessert. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to get into it. Don't forget, friends, to hit the like button and subscribe to the channel for countless hours of content on the NBA, MLB, NHL, PGA, MMA, NASCAR, and every other sport that's in season. We also want to talk to you about today's sponsor, No House Advantage, who is taking a different spin on daily fantasy sports by offering player prop contests across the NBA, MLB, NFL, and PGA for cash prizes. This exclusively peer-to-peer fantasy sports platform levels the playing field and makes it easier for you to win real cash compared with your traditional DFS sites. With over 500 player props offerings, No House Advantage is the largest provider of player props in the industry. And the best part is that you will receive a $20 first match deposit bonus today using promo code Awesemo. Be your friends, not the house. Download in the App Store and win big with player props today. First things first, bad beats. Yesterday saw the Bucks finally beat the Nets while the Jazz put the Clippers down 2-0 in addition to baseball and the PGA going on. How did it go for you guys? Ben, we'll start with you.
It was all right. I will say the Bucks game went perfectly according to script in the betting market in the sense that we talked about this on the show yesterday. Bucks come out strong, live opportunity for the Nets. Pretty easy spot on both regards. I thought the Nets were going to ultimately win the game, but they were getting 3.5. That was kind of a gross cover, but I'll take it because I did back the Nets there. Giannis wasn't great on a more of a prop level, but nothing really to say. And then the Clippers have dug themselves another hole. I don't know if they can get out of that, Spags. I mean, they're going to have to win 4 or 5 again. It seems like they're playing with a lot of fire at this point.
Yeah, I'm ultimately happy with the results yesterday. I was backing Chris Middleton a lot, and I think I didn't have a show to talk about yesterday because I was just doing the baseball shows, but Chris Middleton was one of the plays that, to me, was a very strong conviction one. I ended up having over 75% of him. The field was at 30% on Draftkings, or a little bit less than that, so that helped carry me to a profitable day, which has been certainly more stressful than it was playing 500 to 1,000 a night compared to what I'm currently rolling out right there. To cherish the NBA games we have, but to me, just seeing Middleton look good, I actually tweeted about it. I never tweet anymore, but it really was so excited to share in both financial success and to seeing a fellow Chris, even though he spells it with a K, do well. Two things I root for, but yep, no bad beats me, only good beats, and I can save the bad beats for tonight where we don't have a show.
All right, heading into our NBA playoffs today, we have 2 NBA games that'll be full of plays for NBA DFS and the betting markets. So we're going to talk about the top plays on each team. Philadelphia has a questionable Joel Embiid, who should be on the court once again as they look to take back home court advantage at Atlanta. What players and bets look the best here, Spags?
I think Embiid himself, I am assuming that he's going to be playing. He was questionable last game he was in. He's clearly does have a knee issue with a torn meniscus situation or whatever's going on there, but not one that's keeping him from playing in games. So I think barring something weird happening here that we'll get over the course of the next 2 hours here, over the deeper dive and live before lock, I think Embiid's the best play out of the team. Ben Simmons also projects pretty well for me. I think that he looks solid overall. And Danny Green, I think, is on the cusp of being usable value or semi-value on the slate, though. It's interesting because he's one of those players that for DFS, I think he looks like somebody you can get to a little bit. On the prop betting market, though, we do have him as having one of the highest win percentages for his props right now for taking the under on his 2.5 assists. And it's certainly possible he can be useful in DFS without getting there by assists. He's a guy who can get hot from 3 and all of that. But I think really to me, it's a Joel Embiid and then to a lesser extent, a Ben Simmons day for Philadelphia.
Yeah, not much to add. I mean, they're a team that you kind of know what you're getting at this point with all these teams. We've seen enough of them. Of course, they're running a really tight rotation, and Embiid, I mean, barring something ridiculous, he's going to play. He's going to be very effective. He's averaging like 40 points a game in the series so far, and they've needed every single point so far. Pretty competitive. Simmons, I think, is the swing guy. It's very interesting. They seem content, and I don't know why they wouldn't be. Just telling him, you know what, do what you do, but stop Trae Young. And if he can do that, it's not going to impact your fantasy scores, but it's certainly going to make them more live to win the game. He only had 3 shots in game 2. So that's obviously a concern from the DFS side of things. The peripherals look good, but he's going to need more, raw points for you to probably make him playable at a $7,700 price tag.
Atlanta will be without DeAndre Hunter for the rest of the playoffs with his knee issues, but the team will need to solve some other things to win game 3. What looks good, Ben?
Yeah, so on the other side, just the extension of what I was just saying with Ben Simmons, Trae Young, of course, is this team. He's the focal point of the offense. They are back at home, but he was not great in that game too, just 6 of 16, 1 of 7 from 3. And he's still distributing really well. And I think that leads into kind of who can get hot from them. Bogdanovich is a play in the mid 6s that I think you can look to. Minutes are going to be secure, could push upwards of 40 tonight. Obviously dangerous from 3. You've got Capela on the inside, Collins as well if he can stay out of foul trouble. But I think that the Hawks, I'm a little more comfortable getting to their, secondary players outside of their superstar and Trae Young. Whereas looking at the Sixers, we talked about Embiid and Simmons and not much else.
Yeah, I think the whole team looks pretty appealing to me for Atlanta. Trae, I think, comes with a little bit of risk that you did see, as Ben was talking about, a little more of Ben Simmons' defense. He did see also a little bit of Thibault. Thibault was not covering him, not covering Gallo like he did in the first game, and that's kind of what resulted in Gallo being able to get some more shots off because he was completely out of his depth going against Thibault in that first one. So that's something I think to keep in mind for Gallo's prospects here. But I think going to the Hawks in decent volume just seems like an appealing move to me. Bogdan looks pretty solid. John Collins as well, a guy who was on the cusp of being in winning lineups last time out, didn't quite get there, but was also playing some backup 5 minutes. It's worth pointing out that Clint Capela actually lost a few minutes, it looked like, last game because of them trying to go small and go with both Gallo and Collins at the 5 for some more stretches than I think they normally do. So that's something that makes me a little bit less into Capela. I think he's an interesting tournament option as the lowest owned of all these guys, but still, I think I have probably the least faith in him, though. He's another guy with a prop probably looks better for him than does actually play him in DFS. 11.5 rebounds, looks like it has a 78% win percentage from Awesemo today. So that's one spot to go to Capela. But to me, a lot of ownership going to these guys, and I'm willing to be there for a good amount of it. But I think maybe trying to focus more on some of the lower owned pieces in some lineups like Kevin Huerter, like Danilo Gallinari, that could be the good move to get to for Atlanta.
Phoenix is also up 2-0 and beat down Denver to hold home court in game 2. Spags, how do they look on the road?
So I think Phoenix, again, they are not a favorite here. They are a 1-point dog, but I think that the fact that they are only a 1-point dog, I think kind of screams to me that Vegas doesn't really know what to do this one and thinks it's probably a decent chance here. Like they don't want to favor Phoenix on the road, but I think you could have made the case from those first 2 games, especially that blowout, kind of getting out of hand last game, that they might just be a little bit too good of a team for Denver to keep up with as shorthanded as they are. So I like Phoenix a lot. I think Chris Paul has been a guy that I've been backing for pretty much throughout the entire playoffs. And now that shoulder, he was really knocking down some threes last game. That gives me a lot of faith in him once again today. I think Devin Booker has probably seen the toughest defense out of everybody, but he's been a solid player. Ayton also looks good again. This team, to me, I think a team you can make the case to play 4 guys from tonight from Phoenix, assuming that there's no pathway for Denver to blow them out. And probably my favorite DFS team on the slate, which was not the case for them a lot of the year, but the price points on DraftKings, I think, are really good for a team who's been good and gets a big boost playing against Denver's weak defense.
Interesting game. 223.5 total. You mentioned Nuggets slight favorite. We're going to dive into the betting side. Obviously, a little more as the show goes on. I will say that I do think Denver makes this 2-1 pretty comfortably tonight, but that doesn't change the fact that Phoenix can be very, very appealing from a DFS standpoint. Spags just mentioned Chris Paul looks worlds better, where I thought there was a chance that he was just going to be out of the playoffs, when he got hurt there. He seems to be, fully recovered, honestly. And if he's going to push for, we have him projected for 37 minutes right now. That's really good value at 7,100. Booker is Booker, fantastic player. Then you've got Ayton, you've got the wings and Crowder and Bridges. I'm kind of neutral on them. I think I'm a little soured on Ayton in general. I think that looking at him on the road tonight, don't expect a huge game. And I respect Denver, I think, a little more, that they will fight back. Maybe they don't win this series because that is a tall task after getting smacked in 2 games. But I expect the best version of the MVP. If your boy Michael Porter Jr.'s back is all right, they really need him tonight. Barton coming back, I think, is also something to talk about. I know we haven't dug into Denver just yet, but from the Phoenix side, I think better DFS play than betting spot.
Denver is in a familiar position with another series deficit. Can they dig out of their hole tonight at home? And who looks best, Ben?
I think they can. I hope they can, because I bet them pretty heavily tonight. So you're going to assume that Jokic is going to be leading the way. They're going to need everything from him. He's the most expensive player. He should be. He can do everything, but he needs a sidekick. Obviously, it's not Jamal Murray. It's got to be Michael Porter Jr. He looked pretty hurt. I'm not going to lie. That was not a good game in game 2. They need him to be healthy. If they don't get that, it could be curtains. But I think he's going to be better tonight. And then the rest is, can someone step up, whether it's Barton, Rivers. Monte Morris in the past has been good, but I think he's a little suppressed. There's a lot of bodies here. So for me, Spags, it's kind of the inverse. I really like Denver from a betting standpoint, but I think I would lean Phoenix in the DFS side of things.
Yeah, I mean, I like some of the Denver guys, and the thing with Michael Porter Jr., the fact that he wasn't questionable at all going into this one, it has been probable, I think gives me a little hope that maybe the back has loosened up a little bit. But I think I agree, like watching the games, normally you have to look at the data, and the fact that Porter was able to do anything at all, like he shot 3 for 13, but he still did have 6 rebounds. It's not a crazy number for him. He's not getting assists anyway, so I think the numbers don't look that insane. But if you did watch the game, it's one of those spots where he's kind of lumbering, had kind of a Frankenstein kind of lilt to him with how he's moving around, which is not what you want to see from your aggressive wing who just has to shoot better to really keep this game competitive. So I'm willing to take the stabs on Porter Jr. I think I'll be there today enough, just because I'm hoping that modern medicine can cure a back for a young dude who does have a history of back issues, but still was able to play enough minutes in that game and was out there and just didn't hit his shots. Like maybe the touch gets a little better. Maybe he figures out how to work around it a little bit more. That's my hope for the day. But still, Nikola Jokic, we know what he is. We also know for the most part what the rest of this team is, where you're not going to have a ton of faith or comfort going to these guys. Campasso and Monte Morris draw away from each other. Will Barton also being in the lineup draws away from those guys, and he's also too expensive to play on his own. So it's really, to me, a Jokic and Michael Porter Jr. situation. And Paul Millsap, I think, is the one guy as a value play that there's a pathway for him to earn more minutes. He's been really productive since Jamal Murray went out with his injury at like a 26% usage rate, and rebounding at a higher rate and assisting more. So that's one thing you watch for the rotations, and maybe he's the lever to pull if you don't play enough Porter Jr.
All right, fellas, how is our soccer knowledge?
A+, I guess. I just have to be confident. If I fail, like, no, that's fine. But it's coming hot.
All right. Well, the calendar may say it's 2021, but last year's postponed tournament, Euro 2020, will start up this weekend with these big battles between European powers. So which look the best? We're going to go through these one by one. We've got Wales sitting at plus 290 versus Switzerland plus 115, over under 2.5 goals, Ben.
Yeah, so with soccer, just to throw it out there as well, there's a tie element. Like you look at that and be like, wow, these are the easiest bets of all time. They could also draw, and then if you bet either side, you lose. So this is, the start of group play. For people who don't know, just real quick, you've got 24 teams. That's 4 groups of 6 groups of 4 rather, and the top 16 will move on to more of a knockout phase, kind of like March Madness. So you get points. You're playing in a round robin tournament. So we're getting the groups started. Turkey and Italy played today. Wales and Switzerland are the other part of that group. So they're going to get things started tomorrow. I think those are the teams that are going to be vying kind of for that 2nd and 3rd seed in here. Turkey did not look good today. Italy, of course, is the team to beat, and they're playing in Rome as well. So that's a good situation. But getting to this game, I think it's going to probably one where I don't take a side. I think draw could easily be in play. The one thing I do lean to, though, Spags, with some of these teams, goal differential matters in soccer. So like if you lose 5-0, that's a lot worse than losing 1-0, of course. I think both of these teams are going to be content to maybe park the bus a little, and this goes under 2.5 goals. I wouldn't be stunned to see this game honestly end 0-0 and both teams take a 1-point draw and move on to the next game.
I think I'd take the over here, and here's why. You see a
Okay.
guy like Gareth Bale out there, and he's one of those guys who's just always going to be pressing offensively. 3.55 shots per match, a 44% on-target accuracy, and he's actually handling direct free kicks for the guys right now, so that's something that I think is going to give him a little more upside for DFS. I'm also directly quoting from our article that's on the site right now covering Euro 2020 from our guy Giovanni Vidalis, who's been doing the content for us for soccer for a while, but I felt smart for a minute there, and I hope you guys are buying in on the Welsh like I am. Gareth Bale, you kidding me? This guy, pure striker. That's what I call him.
They have a sick flag. That part I can confirm. I love the Wales flag, and you can never discount that.
And that's where our royals live, right?
Sure. And Wales.
Yeah,
Literal
Wales.
You walk down the streets of Wales, and there's just actual whales with an H just walking around, tipping their cap to you, saying, hey, have a great day.
Yeah.
Spags, you shouldn't have outed yourself. I totally would have believed you.
Yeah, you were bringing the fire. I was going to say, wow, Gareth Bale mentions that game is also being played in Azerbaijan, which I don't think either of these teams have a huge presence there. Not going to lie. So there's no home field in that one.
I'm going Wales because Diana, Princess of Wales.
All right.
Okay. Next one. We've got Denmark minus 227 versus Finland plus 800 over under 3.5 goals. Spags, hit us with some knowledge.
Oh boy, I only.
The article doesn't go that far, does it?
So no, here's the thing: Denmark, a big favorite, and a big favorite for good reason, I would say, with guys like Control F Denmark, guys like Christian Eriksen. I mean, you look at a guy like Christian Eriksen, he's handling all the sets for Denmark, and they come in as the biggest favorites. And Eriksen does lead the nation in overall scoring, 40% goal contribution, 3.3 shots per match is recent match form. I think his floor, could be right there with some of the other guys, but to me, I think this is where I'm going, Ben. That's all I could muster up.
So yeah, well said, Spags. You're definitely on the right side there. I don't expect any funny business for this game. It's in Copenhagen, which I do think is a factor. And you can just look at the rankings here. Denmark, I think, is a fringe top team in the world. Finland's going to finish in the basement of this group. We're going to get to the other side of this, the rest of this pod, but they're kind of overmatched. This is their first ever appearance in the Euros. It's I think, pretty fortunate that they got in through European qualifying and whatnot. But Denmark is a legitimate team here, and playing in Copenhagen, I expect them to get off to a really good start, 2-3-0 type game.
And lastly, we've got Belgium minus 143 versus Russia plus 400 over under 2.5 goals. Spags.
Why am I first again?
Yeah, you're first again.
I meant to go to bed.
No, too late. So this game, Belgium, if you want to check out me and Josh Ingelman's soccer contenders video, it is live, and Belgium is certainly included in there. That's a team that I think can make a very, very deep run. They've been so close in so many big time tournaments. I thought they played a hell of a match against France in the World Cup. They've had their chances, and I think this is the spot for them. This is a tough game, though. It's in St. Petersburg. Russia is a solid team. I do think ultimately Belgium will get through just because they just have too much talent. De Bruyne's back, even though he broke his face. Lukaku, just too much firepower. But Russia's a tough game, and again, drawing a team that gets to play at home in a tournament like this is certainly unlucky. Belgium does not have home games. The pods are in Copenhagen and St. Petersburg, so I'm going to back them, but it's not a shoo-in, and it's probably a game I won't bet individually. It's more betting Belgium to kind of move on from the group.
Yeah, I feel like Belgium, you see that Russia overall giving up 8.83 shots per competitive match in their recent form. I guess besides their run in San Marino, it's hard not want to target for me a little bit more of Belgium. And I think in particular, Romelu Lukaku, if you look at his DraftKings price, $9,900, FanDuel, $21, a guy like that, you're looking at somebody who can really just benefit from the amount of shots on goal that Russia's given up. So that to me is what I'm focused on here. Guys like Romelu Lukaku, the salts of the earth players that I expect to see on Belgium's side really thrive against Russia.
Look at you guys go.
Professional.
Well done. That was
honestly, I could pretend to do this better than I feel comfortable with. Like, I don't want to lie to people out there. I try to wear my emotions on my sleeve, but I really think we could start doing touting for more sports as long as there's an article on the site, or I guess one from a competitor that we can just steal into the slide. I feel like there's some ways here for us to just cover all the sports and really make people believe that we know them.
What else can we throw at you right now?
Oh, I don't have anything else.
And what's something weird?
I feel like Ayton was talking about
I think we've got it pretty covered. And that's the great thing about Awesemo is we've got the talent that we've got a lot of people who are really sharp with these sports. You mentioned Giovanni. He does a great job. And we've got some people in our premium Slack that certainly keep up to speed more than us that are covering more MLB and NBA and whatnot. So I've been leaning on them. I do bet a decent amount of soccer, so it is exciting, but you're not going to get better advice from what we got there in that package. I'm really excited to dig into it.
I'll have you covered if it's figure skating. So there's that.
So you ready for the Winter Olympics?
I'm so ready.
And thank you from chat. Brenner isn't playing in the first match, so I do expect him from Belgium as they move on, but that's good to note against Russia. Appreciate that, Garth.
Noted.
Do
people bet on figure skating in the Olympics?
I mean, you could bet anything, but
Yeah,
it's a tough thing to bet because it's subjective, which I don't like.
That would explain some of the judging, though, that
True.
of the judging, I feel like not usually aligns with some people's views on it. So maybe some side action there. No pun intended. Obviously, our sister channel here is not contributing to the delinquency of figure skating betting, but yeah, maybe there's something going on there.
I think I'm related to Olympic figure skaters. Alexa. You guys, I was obsessed with Tara Lipinski growing up.
That's all I got. So
I thought I was her. I would only wear DKNY. I met her and then I couldn't talk. It's the whole thing. But I love Tara. We tweet at each other sometimes. No, but Alexa Knierim and her husband, there's Knierims that are Olympic figure skaters.
Same spelling?
Same spelling, same pronunciation. I interviewed them before the last Olympics. Could not have been nicer people. So we're just going with it related, even though
I like
we
her
don't
outfits.
know if that's true or not.
I mean, that feels like an Eric comment to make, but I do enjoy both the outfits of her. I Googled her and she's got a fun, her partner has a fun jaunty blazer, which I also appreciate. And yeah, she looks like a star. Hard to argue. The Knierim family brings star power over and over again.
You Googled Alexa. She has a new partner now. It's not her husband. So she married the Knierim, hence why she's a Knierim. But now she has a new Chris Knierim. Yes, Chris is no longer her partner. She has a new partner.
So wait, so her husband is not her partner anymore?
No.
That feels like that'd be tough at home.
I don't know what the decision was behind it. I just saw at the last, what was it, Worlds or something recently. She had a new partner. Their short program, long program was really good. But yeah, no longer with her husband. I don't know why. I'll have to call them and ask.
That's an awkward one out of the blue. Hey, I was talking about you on the show today. What happened with the whole not partnering with your husband anymore? Anyway, long time no talk. Great catching up.
All right, back to soccer really quickly. Whether you're a European soccer fan or you just want to play some daily fantasy sports on Draftkings or Fanduel during the tournament, we've got you covered with our month-long European Championship DFS pass for just $29.95. Go to awesemo.com/join now to sign up for our soccer projections to get the entire month-long tournament for that $29.95 price tag. That was on the next line. That was awkward. Okay. So go do that, you soccer fans. Next, we are going to head to the Diamond for biggest bet. So which of these top 5 odds getters on OddsShopper do you guys think is the best overall bet to hit a home run tonight? We've got Miguel Sano plus 250, Jose Ramirez plus 275, Nelson Cruz plus 280, Christian Yelich plus 300, Max Muncy plus 310. Spags, we'll go to you first here, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sure. I will accept going first here. And Miguel Sano, I think, is an interesting leading odds getter. I mean, he was somebody who jumped out yesterday going against J Happ, and in the spot too, I think for him, it's not going against it, but in the game with J Happ, I'm sorry, everything's blurring together for MLB for me because I've been doing so many different slates recently. But Sano, just a guy who talked about a lot yesterday because of the power numbers he brings to the table. A 311 ISO going against Jose Urquidy, and Urquidy, not a guy who gives up a ton of home runs, 3.6% on run rates, basically a little bit above league average. But he does give up a really nice launch angle, 22 degrees. That a guy like Sano, really all he does is hit for power, is going to be in boom bust play for DFS most nights. And then also for betting, like he's going to hit home run or he's just going to strike out 4 times, but you are going to get the outcomes. I think it's going to be one of those 2 outcomes. So to me, you see the odds normally not dying to bet on the favorite unless a Pete Alonso type, a Giancarlo Stanton type. But for this slate, I think the matchup makes sense. And Sano, weather as well going to be there. It's 84-degree weather, it looks like, in Minnesota today. So all of it seems to be to lead that Sano's actually probably a good pick as a leading odds getter.
I'm on board with all that. I'm going to take a slight variation and go to Nelson Cruz for a lot of those same reasons. Really, there's nothing more to say. Same game, obviously same offense, over under of 10.5. So that's a game where both teams could put up some runs. Everything that checks out for Sanu checks out for Cruz. So getting a little better price, plus 280, but I'm comfortable with either of those picks tonight.
All right, now let's head to biggest arm. Which of these top 5 odds getters on OddsShopper do you think is the best strikeouts over bet tonight? And is there a good under bet that we like here? We've got Jacob deGrom over under 9.5 strikeouts, Lucas Giolito over under 7.5, Brandon Woodruff over under 7.5, Tyler Mahle over under 6.5, and Tarek Skubal over under 6.5 strikeouts, Ben.
I'm going to go to Skubal. I think that's a pretty lofty number, but he has been striking out a lot of guys, 28% K rate. And the White Sox have been getting mowed down in a pretty good fashion. So I look at the situation with Detroit at home. Again, a close game. The White Sox are slight favorites on the road here, but over under of 8.5. I think that the Tigers pitcher can go pretty deep here, and I think he could push over that number.
I think Skubal is one of those plays where, to me, he makes a little more sense as a DFS play today, where he's projected to be only 1% owned and does come with a low price tag, but does come with the risk that he's getting hit really hard when he is getting hit. And he also taking a lot of time to finish batters off. Like, he's got that 28.3% strikeout rate that Ben just talked about, but he's also taking 4.3 pitches per plate appearance to get those guys out. So for a guy like this, if he gives up a home run, if it's an at-bat that drags out and then he gives up a home run, that's where the risk for guys like Skubal add up. And I think that's something you can absorb for DFS, maybe don't have to take in the pitching market. So in this spot, actually, I would go to the pitcher in the same game on the other side. Lucas Giolito, over a 30% K rate on the year, facing the Detroit, who has a 27% K rate of their own. I think he's probably got the best mix of matchup and good strikeout stuff. So hard to argue against Jacob deGrom, also hard to argue against Woodruff, just guys who get results no matter what the situation is. But both those guys are facing teams that strike out under league average. So to me, take the easiest matchup, and a guy with Giolito is very unlikely to kill you.
Spags, any weather reports we should be aware of today?
I think the Washington game is actually in some risk after it was postponed yesterday. I think it's still looking like a pretty decent chance. I don't see if actually might be fully postponed by now. I didn't see the alert come through while we've been on the show, but that's a game that looks good on paper once again to play if it somehow does go off because the ownership won't be there. But I think it's unlikely to play because the weather is really bad. So that's your weather alert for the day that I've been barely paying attention to.
The greatest matchup in baseball, greatest rivalry is going on right now at Wrigley Field, in case anyone wanted to know. Cards, Cubs. Wish I was there. All my friends are there.
I wish you were there too.
Harsh.
Yo!
Well, no, for your happiness.
For your happiness. Good one. Oh my gosh. Rude. Good to see you too, Spags.
I got to get a bid while we can.
Also, I'm really glad we got the chat talking about figure skating. We got a Michelle Kwan shout out. That was Tara's arch nemesis. I was not a Michelle Kwan fan in the day. I think they're friends now. That's actually where my love of Jim Nantz came from, because he interviewed both of them following Tara's win. She was the youngest to ever win a gold medal, the Nagano Olympics. And her and Michelle, it was, you could cut the tension with a knife. They hated each other.
Oof.
And thus began my love for Jim Nantz. Also, someone brought up Tanya Harding and Nancy Kerrigan. Oof.
Well,
I don't know if we want to go there.
That's a classic one.
Did you guys see, why am I blanking? Tanya?
I did not. I know it exists, but I'm like, that's honestly a depressing one. I don't like her life's depressing. The way that it affected Nancy Kerrigan's depressing. I'm sure they had some positive spin on it, but that's just the whole situation is kind of a downer.
I don't have a positive spin on it. It's a sad story. Crazy. But it's a great movie. And who doesn't love Margot Robbie?
Yeah.
Ben, do you want to add anything?
No. Wolf of Wall Street, great movie. That's what I got.
We went almost 3 months without mentioning Wolf of Wall Street. And it's Ben of all people.
Was that on the bingo card?
No.
Old horn dog Ben just watching the movie through gifts on Reddit.
So unexpected from our resident doctor. Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
You know how it is.
You probably give a thorough checkup on Margot Robbie after that.
Oh no.
Here we go, Spags.
I'm gonna get us back on track. Get access, friends, to all the great Awesemo Plus tools and content for nearly every DFS sport out there with an Awesemo Plus weekly pass for $29.95. This includes full access to all the premium content and tools on Awesemo.com, including player projections, ownership projections, our premium Slack channel, lineup builder, and much more. If you're a new user of Awesemo Plus Platinum, then you can take advantage of the promo code we have for this show, which is TIPOFF. All caps, one word, that's tip off for 15% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum. Of course, if you're only interested in playing NBA DFS, then you can sign up now for our Awesemo Plus NBA Weekly Package for only $16.95 and our $4.95 NBA Weekly Express Package, which gives you full access to Awesemo Plus NBA Showdown and single game contests. It is now time for the Dr. Ben Rasa prop bet of the day. I feel like we're flying through the show today.
We are.
We can pump the brakes here.
We might have needed a segment or more in here. Honestly, might have to go get the puppet some point.
No, there's not going to be any puppets.
Well,
Oh.
I also made a promise yesterday to sample ranch and salsa, which I failed to do, but I went and got it.
Well, do we have to do this on the show now?
Yeah.
Okay.
We will.
Good.
I don't know if we want to do that now, though. Maybe
we definitely do. We have like 3 segments left. Are you kidding me? Yeah, we're doing that today.
Well, yeah, we're going to do it.
Okay.
I just don't know if we might need to save it for later in case it tastes bad and I have to leave.
Oh, you have to purge?
No, hopefully that won't happen. But we'll do the Ben Rasa segment, Dr. Ben Rasa. We'll do it before.
Well, let's do it after No House
goes.
Advantage. So because they'll get extra sponsorship notice then, because they'll be like, oh, No House Advantage, and then Kayla threw up on the stream after eating salsa and ranch together after believing a YouTube person would have great recipes.
All right, yes, good plan. Okay, so it is now time for the Dr. Ben Rasa prop bet of the day, with Dr. Ben now at 20-11, with Giannis only picking up 2 assists amidst the Bucks' big win in Game 3. We're on a certifiable cold streak since you hit the 20-win mark, Ben. And normally it'd be poor form to ask a bettor about a cold streak, but I am an intrepid journalist, Ben. So tell me, how are you feeling right now?
An intrepid journalist. I feel all right. You know, it's one of those things, you know, you flip the season, you get to the playoffs. Some of the process that you're doing to evaluate props, it's just things that you may have to tweak. There could be some variance. Certainly I ran really hot there. And these are things expected. The thing you don't want to do is change up and start wildly deviating from kind of what got you there. So we're not going to do that. We're going to stick to the script, hopefully metaphorically and literally for this show, and see if we can get things done here.
All right. Brighter times are ahead, we hope. So what is the Dr. Ben Rasa prop bet of the day? Enlighten us.
So it's really just going to be an extension of me liking the Nuggets tonight in the game. As I mentioned, they're a 1.5 point favorite. I do think they're going to win at home tonight. I would love to go to Michael Porter Jr.'s points. I just don't want to do that because I don't know if he's okay. And that's just incurring more variance than I want. I think that Jokic, of course, is kind of sealed with their fate. I don't see many ways where the Nuggets really have a good game tonight, and he doesn't. His over-under is 29.5 points, which I think is pretty fair, but minus 105 to the over to me is a really good number. I've seen that sitting at minus 120 at some spots, minus 115 at some spots. It's going down a little bit. I've got some minus 105s out there for 29.5. A lot of books have it up to 30.5. So for me, just looking at him, he's going to have to do everything. It feels like if they're going to win this game, he's going to be involved. If they're down, he could take upwards of 30 shots tonight. If Michael Porter Jr. is limited in any way, he could take 30 shots tonight. And I do think at home, he'll be a little more active in terms of getting to the line. He's been quiet. He didn't take a free throw in Game 1. He was 5 of 6 from the line in Game 2. I just expect an all-around better effort from the Nuggets. I think they push over their team total. I think they win the game. And by extension, the MVP is going to have a big night tonight. So he's going to clear that 30-point mark, put us in the W column to round out the week.
I would say, too, this line has come up a little bit, I think, because I had it at 28.5 on our prop betting tool before the show. And that's something, too, that we talk about with OddsShopper, but I think you're actually seeing it in real time right now that, like, if you are on top of these odds and you get them early enough, like, you're just getting better value, where the 28.5 line, which actually might still be out there in a few books, that one has a 70% win rate according to Awesemo today. And I'm with you. I think taking the over here, like, I think Phoenix is going to make this one real tough. I honestly don't have a great lean about who's going to win it, but either way, like, Jokic is going to be a part of the outcome. And I think, too, the odds of him playing through blowout conditions is probably higher, where last game he didn't end up getting a ton of run in the fourth quarter. Got a little bit less than he would normally. In this spot, you kind of have to keep him out there because you can't go down 3-0. Like the series is over if you go down 3-0. So I think taking it over in this spot where Jokic has to get things done seems like a good move.
Yeah, I mean, just to speak to that, this is it. I mean, just like Milwaukee yesterday, you have no choice but to put everything into this game. And friend of the show, Steve, brought this up about Michael Porter Jr. The thing about a prop is you're literally honed in on the guy specifically. It's binary. You need him to play well. Backing the Nuggets, even if Michael Porter Jr. is limited, that's obviously not a good thing for the bet, but there are ways that they can overcome that. They could still win the game and he could be hindered. But if I back him in the prop market, if he's hindered, I'm just going to lose that prop. So I would rather structure it where I like the Nuggets. I do think that he's going to be all right and help them. But even if he's not, it puts me a little behind the 8 ball, but the Nuggets can get it done without him. And certainly Jokic could erupt for 45 points in a loss. That's in the range of outcomes as well.
Yeah, I would say too, that's the thing for me where like if Porter Jr. shoots well, they probably are going to win this game or at least be very close to it. Whereas if Jokic shoots well, like it doesn't necessarily mean the game's going to stay close, but he's going to still be doing his best to keep it competitive. And Porter Jr., I agree. Like I would much rather take a Jokic prop than a Porter Jr. one right now. Like I like him as a DFS play. I'm going to be willing to take that risk on today. Like I think it's comparable to Chris Middleton, though obviously you do have an actual injury attached to it. And there's something that I think one fact about Michael Porter Jr. that could be interesting and kind of can go either way, where he was the league leader in the year and the mix of contested and uncontested threes. And he's been so good contested threes that, maybe part of that is due to the fact that his back has been healthy enough. He does kind of contort a lot on shots to get a little bit of distance on the shot blocker that's going against him. But I think too, the fact that he's been good getting contested shots up all year, like he's not going to get that same rhythm of movement. So he should kind of be able to just get what he gets normally anyway, because he has been a guy who can hit shots with a hand in his face. So that's my hope for the day, is that he can get there. But I agree, you're just taking on double the risk by taking him to a prop market compared to DFS where it's sort of binary.
Jeffrey in the chat says he can't stand MPJ and that he's all hype. Jeffrey, are you new here?
Shut him down. Show him who's boss by eating both salsa and ranch combined into one.
We are a pro MPJ show here, by the way.
We are.
I mean,
first you hate him, then you all love him because he does great. Now you hate him again because he's hurt.
He's very volatile. He is, honestly, it's an up and down journey. You are ride or die for him every single day.
That's
so
right,
I
I
will
am.
certainly. Yeah, I will not be mad at that. But no, he's for DFS players, he has been an emotional roller coaster. And today I will be taking that ride once more.
Buckle up. Here we go. All right. We're going to head over to No House Advantage prop or not. Here are some of No House Advantage's props of the day for key players. Guys, do we like the over or under on them, and how many points would you assign? First up, we've got Joel Embiid over under 39.5 points plus rebound Spags.
So this is one I actually would shade towards the over right now. And these are props today. These aren't necessarily going to be the best props at No House Advantage because the projections hadn't gotten an update before the show. So make sure you're checking them on the site to keep tabs on which ones are actually going to be the best throughout the course of the day, because sometimes just the publishing schedule ends up a little bit behind with when we're scheduled. But for today, I do think this bet to me is still probably to be a mid-tier one. I think you're going to find some of the other bets that we've talked about throughout the show, like some of the Danny Green props maybe have a higher probability. But for Joel Embiid, I just feel like he's going to bring it once again in the spot. I think one thing that bodes decently well for him is they did put a little bit less Clint Capela on the floor down the stretch. And that could have been a strategic in-game thing. Could have just been because they are trying different lineups to see what's going to work. But the fact that there could be more John Collins center minutes and Gallo minutes at the 4 just means there's nobody who's even going to have a shot to stop Embiid. So I would take a lot of the props for him as an over today. But I think that one where you're getting points plus rebounds, 2 things that he does in great volume, I think that's probably the best mix.
Yeah, well said. I mean, the way he's going, he has a shot to clear this just on points. And he's going to fall into some rebounds, of course. He's a good rebounder. He's healthy. I don't worry about it. It doesn't seem like this injury is getting worse. He's kind of just playing with it. So he shouldn't be limited in any way. And they're not going to be careful either. This is not 2-0, and they're just looking for a split in Atlanta. I'm sure they'd take a split and make it a 3-game series, but they can't mess around. It is 1-1 here. So Embiid's going to play major minutes. I think this is one when you just look at how strong he's been. I don't really see that changing again tonight. So I'm with you, Spags. I would go over.
Also, we did just get an update during the course of the show, it seems, and it's worth pointing out. So I guess I feel good about my instincts now. The Joel Embiid rebounds prop apparently looks really good according to Awesemo today, 85% chance of hitting. So I'm still comfortable with points plus rebounds, but that one would be probably a top one just for the rebounds on Joel Embiid.
All right. Next, we've got John Collins over under 14.5 points, Dr. Rasa.
So this is one that I do lean slightly over, but definitely not one that I'd want on the top of my No House Advantage card. Looking at the betting market right now, that line is still 14.5, slightly juiced to the over. And it's a situation you mentioned that he could take some center minutes. When he stays out of foul trouble, he's very effective, and certainly Trae Young gets him the ball in really advantageous positions. It's nothing against the play. You're really looking for, exploitable things of guys not in the rotation, lines that have really drastically moved. This is not that. You're just playing this prop straight up. So I do think it'll go over, but you're still looking more towards a 50-50 type rather than an 80-20 that's out there.
So I've been very bullish on John Collins, including the last slate, and I'm willing to be there again today. The DFS price tag really is what stands out, but it's also the fact that he's just getting a good run of minutes and the fact that he can seemingly stand to play a little bit more in center minutes and a matchup that feels kind of counterintuitive, where you would think they want Capela out there more, especially a defensive coach like Nate McMillan, but it does seem like they were giving more minutes to Collins at the center, and I think that's something that could hold here, especially if he runs a little better. And I think there were some plays last game that he could have made that would have made him easily clear where he needed to be DFS-wise. wise. But for the spot, I just have him projected to be over the marks for the prop here on No House Advantage. And I just like John Collins more, especially because I think after the last few games, you have to shade a little more coverage towards Kevin Huerter, a little bit more to Danilo Gallinari. And obviously, you still have to keep Trae Young from doing what he does. And whoever else is on the floor doesn't really matter. Collins, to me, is the guy who just benefits from those guys being hopefully paid more attention to. So in this spot, I think there's a lot of ways Collins could benefit. So to me, top DFS play on the day, unfortunately, and also a pretty good over on No House Advantage.
And lastly, we've got Michael Porter Jr. over under 25.5 points plus rebounds. Spags.
This is one for me that I would also take the over. I guess I'm very bullish on some of these overs here that we're hitting on today, but Porter Jr., I just think there are some pathways for him to be useful and to figure out how to work around whatever back issues. This is something that's happened for him in his life before, and it sucks, but clearly he's determined to play through it. Again, he gets the probable tag today instead of the questionable tag, so he's either feeling better or he's just like, there's no way you guys aren't going to play me at this point. And a lot of what Denver does, if they're going to win a game in the series, I think you have to have an outlier scoring effort for Michael Porter Jr., and he was rebounding actually better than I would have thought given the back issues. So in this spot for me, Michael Porter Jr., I would take the over here, and probably more of a mid-confidence one, even though I am, I think for DFS going to be heavy on him, but I feel like it's a 5 or 6 pointer and No House Advantage.
I would agree. I honestly wish, if you want to get into a little game theory situation, I wish this line was even lower because you could leverage against it and leave it off your card if you think there's a chance that he's really limited, because there is I think a non-zero chance that he's just not able to produce much of anything. But more often than not, when you're talking about median outcomes, he's going to push over this number. If he plays his full allotment of minutes, if he's not limited in any way, it is a soft line, and it's going to be one of the better on No House Advantage. But that is something, as you dig into the intricacies of having to get an edge on people, sometimes leaving one off your card can be just as good as fading it. And if everyone grows there and they miss, you can be ahead of the game in that regard.
All right. And as always, friends, don't forget to play on No House Advantage, our sponsor, who is taking a different spin on daily fantasy sports by offering player prop contests across the NBA, MLB, NFL, and PGA for cash prizes. This exclusively peer-to-peer fantasy sports platform levels the playing field and makes it easier for you to win real cash compared with your traditional DFS sites. The best part is you can join for free today. Just download the No House Advantage app and use promo code Awesemo to receive a deposit bonus of up to $20 for new signups. Be your friends, not the house. Win big with player props today. Okay, before we do the Salsa-ranch review, Ben, really quickly, how did the Belmont Stakes go for you, and what is happening with tennis? I'm stalling.
The Belmont Stakes was bad. Essential Quality won. Who was the favorite? Well deserved. It's a fine horse.
I think he was my pick on the show, if we're going to recall.
Look at that. There we go. Spags, the jockey connoisseur. Yeah, I mean, it was just the wrong price for that horse. So nothing against him. The tennis, from what I can gather, because I'm on a show and I'm not watching it, of course, Nadal is in serious trouble. So we will see where that goes. Tennis has been great, though. It's another sport that, again, at Awesemo, we've got some really sharp guys. Blaine and the crew do a great, great job. So I'm glad that Good Dog and Bad Dog yesterday, I didn't mention the tennis too much, and I'm glad because I could have got myself into some more trouble. I have a position on Nadal, but not a big one. This could have been problematic.
I am obsessed with Nadal, in case anyone cares.
I care.
He's very good on clay.
You should take him to the Cubs game.
That's a fact. There you go. Look at that. I doubt he's been to Wrigley Field. Almost could confirm that he hasn't. So,
for my 30th birthday, I went with my family down to the Bahamas, and it ended up being the same weekend as Tiger Woods World Hero Challenge or whatever that tournament is. And Nadal was there following Tiger around. So we were following Tiger. So technically I was following Nadal.
Surprised Tiger wasn't following you based on
transitive properly.
He has a great butt. Just putting it out there.
Hey, look, I think we all know that. That's
so tell us something we don't know, Kayla. Come on now.
All right. Are we doing this? I don't want to.
Yes. No, we have to. I mean, it's going to be a delicious treat. So can you get the setup though? Or does Ben remember the setup from yesterday? I feel like we need to set the table.
Oh, yes. Ben, set this up while I set this up.
Set this up while you set this up. So from what I remember, at some point, chat was talking about sauces, and ranch and salsa was combined per Kayla, which I was not on board with because those are both good things, but I wouldn't want to combine them. So apparently right now we're gonna test out if that's actually feasible. We're gonna do a little ranch salsa. The dogs from Good Dog Bad Dog will probably be barking because they don't approve of this, but See, look at that. I knew the dogs would be riled up about this. Do you have chips or are you just like going straight sauce?
No, I got chips. I'm not an animal.
I don't know what
It does look like
are.
you are going to dig in with a spoon.
Yeah, come on now. You got
also,
like a
like how
ladle.
big is that spoon?
That's what I'm saying. You got a straight ladle. That's a little egregious.
This is my large spoon. I have small spoons and large spoons. I also shot ranch everywhere when I opened it. And I didn't bring a napkin.
Oh, if only YouTube had seen that.
Yeah.
This isn't mixing well.
This is shocking. It isn't mixing well. Who would have thunk it?
It's a little watery.
Yeah, it does look watery.
Also, these chips are definitely stale.
Are you like a good cook normally, Kayla? Like, are you good at like flavorology and like making things?
Do I look like I'm a good cook?
No, honestly, if I had to pick.
Are these Trader Joe's chips? What are these chips?
Actually, with my former job, we had a sponsor, Tortillas. So these are Tortillas chips.
No house advantage.
Not an ad.
Okay.
What are these? Cantina style. I have literally 10 bags of these chips in my cabinet that are from last year. Okay. We mixed you missed it, but I mixed the ranch and the salsa. It is Trader Joe's salsa.
Can we get one more view on camera of it before you dive in? Like hold it up a little bit closer to the camamera. Yeah.
Is it gonna spill? It's watery.
Yeah, it does. It does look like the most appealing thing I've ever seen, if we're being quite honest.
It does not look good. I'm nervous. Okay. Well, here it goes. And I don't have a napkin and I'm making a mess. Okay.
Drum roll.
Why is it so watery? Is this normal? It's like drippy. Okay.
And you're a doctor. Is that normal?
I've never seen that one before. Chad, you're going to have to give us some, even if they're pity likes, we're going to ask for some likes for doing this. This is uncharted territory here on the Tip-Off Show.
The chip is disgusting because it's like probably 10 months old.
Mm-hmm.
The sauce is so good, you guys.
Oh, okay.
It's a pineapple salsa, so it's a little sweeter. I didn't have regular salsa. Oh my gosh, what's not to love? Salsa and ranch? I think we're onto something.
We've cracked the riddle.
I mean, gotta be honest, it would have been more fun if you absolutely hated it, but I guess it's nice that it's a good thing for you.
Now my cord is doused in ranch because, well, this is a mess, you guys. Highly recommend, though, for your next party, mix some salsa and ranch. Fan favorite.
Oh, Eytan's disgusted by using pineapple too. I don't know if they have pineapples in Philly. They might just die the second they enter the state lines.
I'm not even lying. That's fantastic. So all you haters, joke's on you.
Huh. All right, Ben. Now where's yours?
I'm gonna stick to I'll stick to the NBA. That's all I can bring to the show. I have no confidence. No salsa handy. Sorry, fellas.
Who's eating what next week? This was fun.
I've committed at one point, I don't know when we're going to do it, but on the Splash Play show that I do with Peter Overs, that we have committed to eating a whole pizza on the air during the course of a show at some point this summer. And I don't know when that's going to be, but that's one of those things like I could probably do in real life, but not within an hour while making coherent content. So I support food eating on shows, drinking on shows. The more, the merrier.
Why don't we drink more on shows?
I mean, maybe next week if, I don't know if we're permitted to talk, but if we have our tip-off hiatus coming up here with the NBA season wrapping up, maybe that Friday's a drunk show because that's the last show I have for the day.
That sounds fun.
I don't know Ben's drinking status.
Pop some margaritas and eat some.
After this show, everything's in bounds. If we survive till next week, which I would say is doubtful at this point, we'll see what we can come up with.
The Super Monkey wants me to eat Colorado oysters, which I believe are the Rocky Mountain oysters, which look like a penis, I believe, if I recall. So there's
something else.
Look, for the bit, sure. Oh no, they're bull testicles. That's right. Yeah. My bad. There's another oyster that looks like a penis, but that's not the one. I'm confusing my genital-based oysters.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, no one take this idea because now I want to trademark it and sell it. Ranch salsa.
Yeah, Friday we'll be having alcohol next Friday, and you will be drinking an entire bottle of ranch mixed with salsa.
That is right. All right. Well, look at that. Here we are. Good dog, bad dog. Is he gonna play it again? There we go. Fellas, in real life, there is no such thing as a bad dog. And betting in DFS, there are a lot of underdogs who may have no chance in their game. So who's a good dog to target tonight and who's a bad one? Ben, give us your good dog.
Just by process of elimination here, I guess I would have to go with the Hawks. I think the Hawks are much more and these are barely dogs at this point. They're 1.5 point dogs, so you're not going to call this an upset. But just looking between the two games, to me, the Hawks have a better chance of knocking off the Sixers and going up 2-1, even though I think Philly wins the series long-term than the Suns. I really am digging in here that the Nuggets get it done tonight.
I'm going to take Phoenix as my good dog. I think they have a good shot to win this one. And, I agree that Atlanta being a home dog, probably a little bit more appealing, but for this spot for me with Phoenix, I just think they've shown that they can really take it to Denver, and they're doing it in games too without Devin Booker being that great. So I think to me in this spot, I'm willing to go there as I'm like, for some reason, I just didn't clear my throat. I should have cleared my throat instead of suffering through that. But Phoenix is my good dog, and now I can swallow.
We really enjoyed hearing the phlegm.
I know. I hated it. I was ashamed for it. Thank you, Kayla.
Okay, now, do you need water, or do you want to give us your bad dog?
No, just a bad dog. The bad dog. I got it down. I swallowed my own disgusting bodily fluids and made it work. So we're all doing things on the show to make it work, Kayla.
Happy Friday, everyone.
The bad dog, I think for me, will be Colorado going into Cincinnati. 5.8 implied runs for Cincinnati in Major League Baseball today, and they should tee off against Kyle Freeland. Kyle Freeland does keep the ball down pretty well, but I just imagine a rotating roster here of guys just getting singles after singles after singles. So that's what I'm seeing for the spot tonight, and I think Colorado has no chance to get to Tyler Mahle would be my prediction.
So naturally, I think we know where I'm going. I'm going to short the Suns. Again, not really a dog. They're just 1.5 points, so it's nothing massive. But I think Denver is going to be able to control this game at home. Much like Milwaukee, I think they punch first. But unlike Milwaukee, I don't think they were. That game, it was 30-9, and then I looked up, and the Nets were on the verge of taking the lead at halftime. And I just don't think we're going to see massive swings to that nature tonight. Phoenix has been really impressive. There's nothing against them, but this is an all hands on deck situation for Denver. And I don't think they go down without a fight tonight.
All right. Heading into make or break, which player or game currently looks like a make or break spot to you on tonight's slate, Ben?
Got to be Jokic. He's the MVP. He's the best player on a team that is losing guys rapidly. No Murray. Porter is somewhat questionable in the sense of we don't know what they're going to get. He has to be the MVP tonight. He can't just be a good player. He has to really show up, and I expect him to.
I think for me, the make or break will probably be Michael Porter Jr. just because he's a guy that, worked with Middleton. So maybe I'm going to be biased and going back to the well again, but I do like taking guys that just the field's not believing it enough, and guys that should be in a good spot if things just work either like they normally do or better than people are expecting. And that's something that I can see happening for Michael Porter Jr. taking on some risk, but I like to live on the edge, as you can tell by me wearing my, whatever this is, a quarter zip. I don't know.
Half zip.
Yeah.
Very preppy.
Yeah, that's how I bring the best for this show always.
Oh, that's so kind.
Mm-hmm.
Also, Eytan doesn't think that counted because I had pineapple in my salsa.
Oh, Eytan just wants a way to get another bet in. he's hoping that somehow you'll lay him 1,001 odds on regular salsa versus pineapple salsa or something.
Oh, it counted.
Always angle shooting. Smart.
He is always shooting an angle. That's Eytan to be a classic pro wrestling manager on another lifeline. And I'd like to see it.
All right, and last but not least today, our fade of the day. Is there one game player or team that you anticipate you'll have a lot less interest in than the rest of the public? Spags.
Man, I honestly like the chalk for the most part today. I guess for me, it would be probably getting a little bit less of Trae Young and a little bit more of the ancillary Hawks pieces, because I think Trae's a fine play today, but I think at his price tag on DraftKings 9,300 in particular, that's sort of where I'm viewing it. I think that could be a little bit much for him, and there are some ways that the other guys just continue to benefit more, whether it be Herter, whether it be John Collins, who I'm backing a lot, whether it be Bogdan. I just think there's some pathways here for Trae not to have a great day. So I guess him, and to a lesser extent Clint Capela, but Clint Capela won't be as owned as Trae.
For me, I think DeAndre Ayton is a player that, tonight, again, not that I'm expecting a horrible performance, but I think there is some fluctuation in there. Of course, he's going to be on the other side of that Denver game that I like so much. So we've seen some really efficient games from him. And then we've also seen some games where he's been very quiet. He's hit 10 boards exactly in 2 straight games. That really helps when you're getting that bonus. But 6,800, you're going to need a good game, and he really only contributes in a couple categories. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him have a pretty pedestrian line tonight.
Fellas, this was a fun Friday with you both.
I agree.
It was, no doubt about it.
Where can we find you guys next? Give us all the plugs.
I'll be back tomorrow doing the deeper dive for NBA. I'm off for today, so I'll just be doing, or not off, obviously I'm doing the show right now, but I'm off for the rest of the day for NBA. So I'll be making lineups, watching deeper dive and live before lock. And then tomorrow I'll be on the deeper dive for Saturday, taking through whatever games are going on.
You can find me in Slack. I will be hanging out. We're going to be betting all week with soccer, certainly the tennis, and a lot of other good games, NBA playoffs. And then, of course, next week, US Open for the PGA. So we have a ton of content to bring you guys. No better time to get inside the ropes, even if it's just for the week. Sign up for a weekly golf pass, really good price, and you get a major on deck.
And you can find me in St. Louis. That was a bad joke.
Wait, are you actually going there this week?
No.
Yeah,
I just wanted to quote Nelly.
Oh, okay. Fair enough. Thought maybe
We've
you
all
would
been
take a
there
trip.
too.
I think it's a reasonable thing to think you might be taking a trip to one of your native regions, but okay, fine.
But not for a few more weeks. Okay. Well, guys, don't forget to like button and subscribe. The deeper dive and live before locker coming your way next. We'll be back with you next week here on the Tip Off. I'm Kayla Knierim. Everyone have a great weekend. We'll see you next week.
Good evening. It's the deeper dive as we get you ready for two big games. And yes, I know already you're disappointed before we even get to Adam that I'm not Lofty. I'm still in Philly, however, if that helps maybe mitigate the damage here. But look, two big games, including the Philadelphia 76ers in Atlanta, the league's MVP now hosting the Phoenix Suns. And yes, Adam Scherer's in the house at ShipMyMoney DFS on Twitter at Shander Show for me. Tyler is producing the show. And listen to this. It's brought to you by Yahoo. So look, Yahoo Sports DFS players, there is a special deal for you today. All new users of Yahoo DFS, you'll get $30 worth of Yahoo Sports rewards points with any deposit of $5 or more. Just use your promo code. Start to get used to this, right? Awesemo. That's right. Promo code Awesemo. You'll deposit with Yahoo DFS for tonight. Will be matched where you go. It'll give you access to the $3K to first Yahoo single game NBA baller contest with an additional $5K MGM Vegas getaway if you take it down. Also, a 2K free roll for Mavs Clippers. All of these things going on there for what's happening with, not Mavs Clippers, sorry, for what's happening tonight. Just use Awesemo's DFS, Yahoo DFS tools to help you take it down. But you're going to want to use everything we have. Draftkings, Yahoo, Fanduel, the premium stuff available to you at Awesemo Plus, and even the free slate today, the NBA main slate ownership projection, which is free to you today, because you want to listen to what Adam has to say and kind of use everything in regards to it. What's up, man? It's, normally we're up bright and early on a Saturday. Now everything's been flipped on its upside down for me, at least. So how you doing tonight?
I'm good. I'm much less hungover than the last time we did a show together. So that's always enjoyable.
Yeah, here's the thing, though, is, and I speak for if it's Tyler, if it's Jordan, if it's Chris, whoever's producing the show, we don't know that until you say it. Like, you carry it as well as anybody, and it's hard. This is not a difficult job in its own right, talking in front of a camera, mic, about whatever topic it may be, but it's really tough to do that when you're hungover, and I got to give you props, brother.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not really sure it's a good thing that I've had enough practice at it that you can't tell, but yeah, that's good, I guess.
I love it, man. Absolutely love it. All right. How are you looking at this tonight? We've got two big injuries, right, to factor in. Joel Embiid, he's playing. Michael Porter Jr., on the other hand, the back injury. If anybody, I don't care if you're a Pop Warner all-star, if you played at a really high level in sports, backs just don't magically get better overnight, but we'll see. So how do you approach tonight with two pretty big impact players having some injury concerns around him, Adam?
Yes, I mean, for Embiid, I'm not really concerned at all. He's played the first two games. He's played huge minutes. He's played well, played 39 minutes in that first game, played about 35 minutes last game. I'm assuming Embiid plays, even though he's questionable, and I'm assuming that he's just good to go and keeps producing at a high level. Michael Porter Jr., I think is a lot more difficult decision because he was pretty clearly hampered by that injury last game. And the thing with injuries like that, though, and we talked about it before, even if he's feeling better today, he's not going to come out before the game and just say, "Oh, I feel great. I'm 100%. Play me in DFS." So you're kind of just guessing, and a lot of it comes down to ownership in tournaments and price. Also, so it's a price point where I'm still willing to take chances. 6,900 on DraftKings is pretty cheap. In some early builds I did, he's just kind of showing up as one of the last pieces in because he's just one of the best plays in that price range, even with the question marks. But there are legitimate question marks. I mean, you could tell that it was bothering him in that game. He shot really poorly in the first couple games of the series. So I think that he's risky, but I also think that the salary reflects his recent struggles, so it makes it a little bit less risky.
Yeah, so Embiid, I think the concern isn't necessarily his health. Look, I'm going to be everybody's going to paint me as biased, including you, now that we've worked long enough together to know that I have a blind spot for my basketball team, and I admit that. But if the Sixers are down or Embiid gets in foul, like, there are reasonable paths to Embiid's minutes being limited if they're either down big, which could happen if Atlanta gets streaky, or if he simply gets into foul trouble, which is very easy to see on the road in this game. So is there any concern outside of the obvious with the injury that may have you maybe mitigate how often you use Embiid tonight?
No, the only mitigating factor for Embiid, I think, is his salary relative to Nikola Jokic, because Jokic is only $400 more expensive on DraftKings. Jokic is actually less expensive on FanDuel. So if you're making a case against Embiid, I think it's purely just that Jokic is also really good and I think projects a little bit higher than Embiid just based on, what we've seen from him all season long. But you have to keep in mind that in the small sample size that is the postseason and these respective series in particular, Embiid's actually produced at a higher rate than Jokic has. So I do think that they're very close. I think that in tournaments, you really shouldn't have too much of an ownership difference between the two. If there is one, you can exploit that. You can just sort of flip it and roster more of the guy that's lower owned. But I think other than just roster construction concerns, I don't have anything negative to say about Embiid because it's not like we're not seeing his minutes limited by the injury. We're not seeing his production hampered, especially on the offensive end. In that first game, he struggled a bit, especially at the beginning defensively, but that doesn't really matter for DFS, especially because Doc Rivers didn't bench him for not being able to play defense, which is really all that we would care about. And things got better as the game went on anyway. So has a 40% usage rate in the first 2 games of this series. There's just nothing showing up that makes me think he's hampered by this injury.
So real quick, because I did see this mentioned on the Slack, on the channel, pardon me. And again, the super chat, the Slack, anything you have for Adam will hit up, including maybe something that wasn't as obvious for a lot of people, but I caught it on a conversation you had with Lofty earlier in the week. The AC is still broken?
Yeah, still just haven't managed to get anybody out here to actually work on it. It rained all day today, so I don't know if maybe that's why they stayed away. But yeah, AC still not working.
I mean, how long can you walk this line here? You're getting closer and closer to the heat of it. You go out late, you come in hungover. That's not a good combination, right?
Yeah, it's really not. This week was brutal. I think I'd said it on a show before. I think my AC's actually been down for like the entire spring and summer. I just never really noticed it until this week when it finally got really hot.
I'm curious, how often do you anticipate trying to work with really the 2 guys on the slate? And ownership, I imagine, is going to be such a big deal here with that, because when you look at the position, especially on DK, where you can have, if it's Embiid at the center and work Jokic in as well, as opposed to just locking in that one center, can you see yourself working both of them in your lineup, knowing that they're going to be super owned? At least Jokic, I think, more so than maybe people are scared off with Embiid's injury. But can you see yourself getting to lineups exposing both of those guys more so than not?
It's pretty rough. I just I knew that they weren't showing up together in my top lineups on DraftKings, but I just went ahead and locked them both in on Fantasy Cruncher and made some lineups to see what they look like, and they are rather ugly. I mean, you're talking like,
yeah, this is rough.
Austin Rivers plus Paul Millsap plus JaMychal Green, Torrey Craig plus Matisse Thybulle plus JaMychal Green, Rivers, Craig, Green together. I mean, you're just getting 3 of those really cheap guys. Obviously you could upgrade them a little bit if you're willing to come off of somebody like Chris Paul or Bogdan Bogdanovic or some of these mid-range guys, save $1,000 going down to like a Jay Crowder or something like that, different positions. But, you get the point. But yeah, these are some really ugly lineups if you go that route. So you do, of course, get a really high ceiling still if you're doing this in like those large, very, very large field tournaments, very top-heavy tournaments. You're just hoping that by some weird occurrence, Austin Rivers and Paul Millsap and Green have big games at the same time, or Torrey Craig or whatever. But, if you get 70 fantasy points apiece from Jokic and Embiid, you can afford to get some of those 15, 16 fantasy point games. But I think it is a very low probability. You're getting some very low probability builds if you go to both of those guys. And the other thing you need to keep in mind is that while the center position isn't particularly strong with it only being a 2-game slate, you do have Capela, you do have Ayton in the mid-range. These are guys that they have question marks of their own in terms of production, but they do have very high ceilings. They are playing a lot of minutes. There's definitely some percentage of the time where, like, you roster Jokic and you roster Embiid, they both score, let's say 60, but one of Ayton or Capela goes for 50 and you're kind of still screwed. So again, just I think a very low probability build does have a high ceiling, just from that stars and scrubs approach, but I think much, much more difficult to do in the postseason than it would be if we were still in the regular season and just had better value.
2-part question on FanDuel here. If you were to just decide between Jokic or Embiid to roster your one center on that lineup, who do you prefer as far as the top 2 guys? And then you mentioned the other 2 obvious pivots clearly on the slate. If you were not to go heavy chalk at the center position on a FanDuel lineup, who is the other one that you would prefer if it's, one of the 2 centers in Capela or Ayton?
So I prefer Jokic if we're just talking raw projection, not worrying about ownership, not worrying about salary, anything like that. Just assuming I can fit Jokic into my lineup, ownership doesn't matter, and it doesn't really cost me any more than Embiid would. I think Jokic, projects a point or two higher than Embiid. But I do think that in tournaments, right now on DraftKings, we have Jokic at 47%, Embiid at 38%. Not a huge difference in ownership, but I think the range of outcomes is essentially the same for these two. And then on FanDuel, I think you're going to get an even bigger discrepancy in ownership since Jokic is actually a little bit less expensive, 43% for Jokic compared to 28% for Embiid. It's only a $400 price difference. It's probably not going to be that difficult to pay, to overpay for Embiid relative to Jokic. Considering again though he has the same range of outcomes, he's basically the same price, and he's lower owned. So in tournaments, I think I actually like Embiid a little bit more given the current ownership.
Real quick, before we look at this first game here, there's just one other thing I wanted to follow up on Michael Porter Jr. I mean, just looking at some of the lines out there, Odd Shopper, of course, is where you're going to get the best available number for you, including the predictive result. And if you look at his total at 17.5, now it's a low number from a book standpoint, I get it, but even from a DFS standpoint, I think you'd want a lot more, 18, 19 points from Porter Jr. Now, I mean, even Odd Shopper says that there's a really strong shot of him going over that number. I'm so concerned about him getting out there and just being out there. And we'll talk about the game and Will Barton and some spark that could happen from Denver, Adam, but just specifically here, do you have a problem with just outright fading him because of the concern, and it's the back injury of all things?
In DFS?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really tough to just completely fade him because the salary, I think, takes into account the injury. Like if and it's indirectly, like I don't think the site's priced him down because he has a back injury, but he has played poorly because of that back injury, and you see that reflected in the price. So I'd feel differently if we were talking about a $7,800 or $8K Michael Porter Jr. You really need him to be at 100% to take on that risk, because Michael Porter Jr., even when he's healthy, is a very volatile player that comes with a low floor but a really high ceiling. When you're getting him at 6,900, I think it's accounting for his struggles. So I could still see an argument, like, for example, on DraftKings in cash in my single lineup, I'm still kind of on the fence. Like, do I want to play Porter, who I think does project a little bit higher than DeAndre Ayton at that same price point? Do I want to play Porter, or do I just want to quote unquote play it safe and go DeAndre Ayton because as far as I know, he's fully healthy? But outside of decisions like that, where you're just like really trying to focus on the floor between the two, I think the salary accounts for enough to where I'd still go to Porter. Definitely pay attention to the ownership, though. I mean, this was somebody that I know Lofty and I mentioned the last time that Denver played, that his ownership was projected to be really high, and we thought that there was definitely merit to just being underweight on him because of the uncertainty of his back and him getting a lot of ownership. Today, I expect that you see a little bit less ownership just because he's coming off of a bad game, but we do still have him projected for 50% ownership on FanDuel, 32% on DraftKings. So the ownership projections at least are saying that, the price, or we think that the price is going to be enough for people to still go there. So it is a spot to pay attention to ownership because of the uncertainty. But for me, in my lineups, I'm leaning towards him being cheap enough that I'm willing to eat the risk.
NBA main slate ownership projections, as Adam is referencing, is one of your free premium tools available to you today. There's other things out there as well. MLB main slate ownership projections, MMA fighter rankings, all free for you tonight. And the reality is that if you become a part of Awesemo Plus, $29.95 for the full week pass, then you get everything. You don't need to wait. You don't need to sit around and just hope, oh man, I forgot, what day is it today? Friday. Okay. Hopefully it's ownership projections. You get everything all the time, and you don't need to wait for anything, not even the shows here. Full access. Now, for Awesemo Plus Platinum new users, you want to take advantage of this promo code ASAP, NBA Deeper Dive. That's the name of the show. All caps, one word. NBA Deeper Dive. You get 15% off your first week of Awesemo Plus Platinum, and you already see with Awesemo Plus how you can turn what money spent into money earned. And then if you're looking for NBA DFS, specifically streamlined, the Awesemo Plus NBA Weekly Package, $16.95. The $4.95 NBA Weekly Express Package gives you full Awesemo Plus access to the NBA Showdown single game contest. But the reality, again, we keep telling you, $29.95 across the board for everything involved on this site. And then Awesemo Plus Platinum to get a little extra, even more so with that. How do you see, just look at this game as a whole, and I'm trying to figure out on my own from all angles, right? Just entertainment to DFS to betting, because there's the element of the Hawks where in one quarter they can get up on one of the top starting fives that the Sixers have around where they can put points up, but the Hawks are so streaky, or they can shoot themselves out of this game. The first two games in Philadelphia, you definitely had that first half in game one completely different, but still the Hawks were able to do that. How do you see kind of the game flow as a backdrop tonight, looking at who to play, Adam?
Yeah, so I'm interested to see. I mean, we saw the Sixers switch up defensively last game. They used Ben Simmons as the primary defender on Trae Young. It changes things because you saw a little bit lower usage rate from Young in that game, 28% compared to 34% in that first game when he was just getting whatever he wanted against Danny Green. It makes it so guys like Kevin Huerter, Danilo Gallinari, Bogdan Bogdanovic have the potential to have bigger games as, catch and shoot guys that can knock down some open looks if the Sixers are successful in forcing the ball out of Trae Young's hands. We know that Young is still a very good playmaker, very good passer. So you're going to get some looks for these secondary guys on the Hawks. And, I think that's it basically, as far as the game goes, I think will most likely come down to, are these guys able to knock down open looks that they get?
Right. So let's look now. Road team will start. And clearly Joel Embiid, the injury aside, I promise you the guy's going to play. He hasn't looked like he's been hurt, maybe a little bit on defense, but you mentioned what he's been able to do and the usage and just the points that he's been able to put up. Let's start elsewhere. Tobias Harris, especially if they're going to keep up with the Atlanta Hawks, if the Hawks are knocking down shots, Harris has to be involved in this offense on multiple levels, from behind the arc to also taking it to the rack. So how do you see Tobias as a play tonight?
Yeah, I think Harris is interesting, especially in tournaments, because he will most likely be the second leading scorer on the Sixers. You assume it's going to be Embiid and then Harris and then six other people and then Simmons. But from a roster construction standpoint, it's going to keep Harris's ownership in check because he doesn't stand out as one of the top options in his price range. And there are guys to pay down for at the power forward position, whether you're talking Jay Crowder, JaMychal Green, the first two that come to mind, but there's, other options as well. John Collins on the other side of this game. Absolutely. So I think that from like an optimal lineup standpoint, if you're building like a cash lineup or playing something similar, a lot of people are going to pay down at power forwards so that they can pay up at center, so that maybe they can pay up at one of the guard spots. And it's going to lower Harris's ownership a little bit. Right now, we only have him projected for about 27% on DraftKings, which isn't very high for a 2-game slate, but you do have a reasonable price tag. You can expect him to play around 37 minutes, assuming this game's competitive. And we know that if anything weird does happen with Embiid, whether his injury acts up or he gets in foul trouble or anything like that, Harris's role becomes even bigger. So even though it's a very low percentile, there is some chance that Harris gets a bump mid-game from something that happens too. So, Harris, I think, has a very high ceiling. I don't think he projects as someone likely to end up in my cash lineup, though.
Now, don't think I missed that shot at Ben Simmons. Not that it was subtle by any means, but look, he's a little cheaper on DK, 7,700. We know as far as this position, there are going to be a couple of other guys of note that are going to be able to score, and I know that's an eyesore for a lot of people with Ben Simmons, but clearly he's been doing a lot. I don't know if the ultra focus, like as we see with Thibault, where the guy can be glue, but if it doesn't transfer into steals and blocks, and if it doesn't transfer into something tangible on the stat sheet, it's very difficult to get points. So it's not going to be to that extreme, but I wonder if so much focus on Simmons turning to Trae Young may limit your exposure to him tonight.
That's my main concern, because we saw it show up last game. He had an 8% usage rate. He had 3 field goal attempts, 2 free throw attempts, only grabbed 3 rebounds in the game. So we saw basically the floor. We saw what the bad can look like from a DFS standpoint for Simmons. Not saying he was bad in that game. Obviously, right. He was great. But from a fantasy standpoint, you saw what the bad looks like. If he goes out and just says, look, my job is to slow down Trae Young. We have Harris, we have Green, we have Curry, we have Embiid. Those guys can score. That's what it looks like from a bad standpoint. And in cash games, like, he's expensive enough on Fanduel that he's not really in consideration in cash anyway, I don't think. On DraftKings at 7,700, he kind of is, just based on the playing time. And if you look at his average production this year, he grades out as a good play at his $7,700 salary. I do think that the concerns that his job is just to deal with Trae Young are enough to lower his projection a little bit for me. It is a concern. But where I'm interested in him is he's only projected for 27% ownership on DraftKings. It's a situation where we've seen it all postseason long. Guys have bad games and then they come out and have big games. We know what Ben Simmons' range of outcomes is. Just because he had a terrible game last time out from a fantasy standpoint doesn't make him doesn't mean he's going to do it again tonight. Yes, it's, I think, a little bit more likely he has a bad game because of the defensive assignment, but it could just be a coincidence. It could just be, that it just happened to coincide with him guarding Young. So you could still see it's certainly in the range of outcomes that Ben Simmons just comes out, plays a normal game, shoots 8 times, gets 10 rebounds and 10 assists, 12 assists, and puts up a very good score for 7,700. So I do think he's volatile enough at 7,700 and relatively low ownership that he's interesting in tournaments. I am concerned about going to him in cash, and I am using those concerns about the defensive assignment as a little bit of a tiebreaker there.
What do you think the likelihood, of a pie chart, what percentage would you apply to the likelihood that Simmons scores 20 plus points tonight?
15, 20.
Okay. I feel a lot better. I thought, and not just as far as to give me shit, I thought your legit analyst answer was going to be somewhere in the double digits or single digits, which I would totally accept. 15% is pretty high though.
Yeah, I have him projected for 13 points.
Okay.
Which obviously, if he mirrors last game, 13 points is absurdly high. It's impossible. I don't think he could have actually scored 13 points last game. But that's, and I'm basing that on, I adjusted, down some for what happened last game, but I still mostly am basing it on what we've seen from him this year. So I have him at 13 points, which,
okay.
I don't know exactly what his standard deviation is on points, but I assume it's going to come somewhere around 15, 20% that he would score 7 points more than I haven't projected for. But again, it does depend on exactly how much you think last game is the model for what's to come.
Don't tell Lofty because he'll insist that I have to move outside of the city limits after placing this wager. But I took a small little shot at Ben Simmons over 19.5 points and the Sixers to win at plus 470. You never know, Adam. You never know.
If Simmons scores more than 19.5 points, they automatically win, right?
Thank you. That's how I was. I wasn't looking at it do I think the Sixers can win? No, I'm oh, look, there's no way in hell the Sixers lose if Ben Simmons scores over 19.5.
Yeah, the only way it happens is if the reason he scores over 19.5 is Harris or Embiid get hurt.
Yeah, that would be catastrophic. But there are other guys to look at before we flip to the Hawks here. The two obvious guys, of course, are people that have one guy has provided the offense. The other guy, I'm just waiting at some point. Maybe he shows up and provides offense in the first half. But can you look at exposure, especially knowing that we have a shorter slate? Can you look at Seth Curry or Danny Green, or maybe even a little deeper now that there's at least a revival of confidence in a guy like a super low-cost option in Shake Milton?
Yeah, so I'm still terrified to go to Milton just because...
I don't blame you.
Yeah, I don't know. We don't know what's going to happen with
Adam.
Milton,
I think
actually.
Doc is still terrified to go to Shake Milton.
Yeah. I think you're still going to have some sort of hot hand situation. I'd be surprised if he jumps ahead of Maxey, entirely in the rotation. But as far as Curry and Green go, I think you can look to both of those guys. You've gotten 36 minutes and 29 minutes from Curry so far. He's around a 0.8 fantasy point per minute guy for the season at 5,300. That's just, a decent projection. It's not likely to win you the slate, but it's likely to get you, low to mid 20s in fantasy points, which on a slate that doesn't have a ton of value and does have guys to pay up for, it's pretty useful. So probably not going to get into my first lineup, but certainly someone that I would have in some lineups if I'm playing, 20, 25 lineups in tournaments. $5,300 Seth Curry is making his way in. $4,500 Danny Green on DraftKings probably gets, a share or two if you're playing 20, 25 lineups as well. Just kind of the same thinking that it's unlikely he has a big game, but he's cheap enough at 4,500 that if he plays 30 minutes, he's probably going to give you a decent enough score. And, you're just looking to make up those points elsewhere. 5K on Fanduel, not quite as favorable, especially because you don't get the 3-point bonus as well. The other thing that I'll mention, and it's not really useful for the main slate, but if you're playing Showdown, you do have a pretty cheap price tag on Matisse Thybulle, who has played 19 and 23 minutes in the first 2 games. He's terrible from a fantasy standpoint, but if he's going to get around 20 minutes on the Showdown slate, I think that is a spot you can look for value.
Look at you. You've enabled even the super chat attacks of Ben Simmons. Joseph, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, not Ben Simmons. Yeah, I get it. He's not shooting the ball. We all get it here in the city. Just make your damn free throws. I think that would be the only thing I would ask for. All right, let's flip the other side here. And again, the narrative is that, actually, is there any interest in Dwight Howard at all, especially because of maybe a path to Joel Embiid either really being hurt, and we all don't believe it, or some early foul trouble, or just foul trouble in general?
I mean, I don't really see it. Like, I don't see anything that makes me more inclined to play Dwight Howard than just saying something like it's a 2-game slate. Playing backup centers is always a reasonable thing in large field tournaments. But the outside of the fact that, Embiid's playing massive minutes, we've also seen, even in the games Embiid missed, Howard not getting a ton of minutes. So there's always that chance that if Embiid is in foul trouble, you just get small lineups and, Mike Scott plays or Tobias Harris plays center or what have you. So there's so many ways that the Sixers can go with this rotation that there's not even a guarantee that Howard is a big beneficiary if something does happen to Embiid.
And to be fair, I'd rather play Michael Scott than Mike Scott tonight, and in general, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Trae Young, it was not easy at all for Trae Young to get to 21 points. But look, I don't know, as great of a defender as Ben Simmons is, I don't have a problem with Rudy Gobert winning it again. I'm not the typical Philadelphian that's bitching and moaning on social media about the snub. But I just, to that point, I don't know how much you can contain Trae Young throughout a series. And even if Ben Simmons and Matisse Thybulle do a really great job on him, Adam, there's still a path for Young to get to 25, 27 points just based off volume. Where is the concern, if at all, for you with Young tonight?
The concern is that the game plan the Sixers used last game worked pretty well. He shot 14% from three. He shot 38% from the field. The thing that makes me feel better about him, especially at his current price point, this would be totally different conversation if he was like 10,200 or something. But at 9,300, not that last game was the worst game Trae Young could have. He can certainly be worse. But you kind of saw the bad Trae Young, and he still scored 43 DraftKings points because he is such a good playmaker. He is so capable of getting assists. Picked up 11 assists in that game. Still had 21 points even on poor shooting. He got to the line, had 9 free throw attempts, made 8. So he still gives you a pretty high floor given the minutes that he's playing. He's now averaged 37 minutes per game in the postseason. You're probably going to get even more going forward because he'd started out the postseason playing like 35 minutes. So the minutes, the assist opportunities, the fact he's still going to take shots, he'll just pull up from the logo and take a couple from there. Still gives you a pretty high floor and makes him, I think, still a good play. Obviously, I would like him more if we had seen him do to Ben Simmons what we saw him do to Danny Green, but that's not likely to happen, at least on a regular basis. But at his salary, given the minutes and the production that you're just going to get from him in general, I still think he's a good play.
Awesome. All right. As far as kind of the bogey versus Collins appears to be, and we'll talk about the center as well in Capela, but Collins appears to be, as far as bang for your buck, the return that you can get, the best play on the Hawks outside of Trae Young. Is that accurate?
Sorry, I was answering something in chat. What did you say?
Oh, no problem. Was it more important?
Oh, it was just I was trying to reiterate that, 43 points isn't enough for 9,300 for Trae Young, but 43 points was probably a 25th, 30th percentile game, considering how poorly he shot. So it kind of just reiterates that that's one of the bad scores you're getting from him.
Yeah, so further that on a little bit, let's say that they can't put the exact same amount of clamp down on Trae. He gets a couple of extra buckets. He could still have statistically a shit game, get to 27, 28 points, and get even to 50 or 49 fantasy points tonight. And you look back and think, man, Simmons, Thybulle, they were all over him, but he's still going to produce overall on your lineup.
Yeah, exactly. Like this, DFS isn't like the season-long leagues where you lose points for inefficiency shooting. Trae Young's still going to shoot. You saw it last game. He didn't shoot well, and his usage was a little bit lower. He had a 34% usage rate in game 1. It was 28% in game 2. 28% is still a high usage rate. He shot 16 times. He had 9 free throw attempts, and he picked up 11 assists. He's just such an integral part of this offense. The Sixers aren't going to just take the ball out of Trae Young's hands entirely to where he's not getting fantasy points. He's just likely to be a little bit less efficient than usual. But if he were as efficient as normal, 9,300 would be one of the best plays on the slate.
All right. So, Bogey, thoughts on some ancillary guys, if you will. I mean, you mentioned John Collins there. We'll work our way to kind of Capela, especially with that matchup. But you've got Bogey, you've got Herter to a lesser extent. the crunching of the lineups, depending on how you view Joel Embiid. I mean, there's a lot of paths here, a lot of exposure I see on crunching some lineups for tonight to both of those guys in Bogdanovich and Herter. Are you looking at working them in, knowing that Herter clearly at that 4,700 mark cheaper than Bogey, but that might be maybe a little bit too high, or maybe Bogdanovich at 6,400 isn't a number that you're comfortable with?
Yeah, I think there's actually some really good value on the Hawks here. Bogdanovich being one that really stands out to me. $6,400 for someone that played 41 minutes last game. And you saw a change in Atlanta's rotation. You know, again, they lost the game, so maybe it doesn't continue. But Okongwu only played in the first half, didn't play at all in the second half. You saw a little bit more of small lineups from the Hawks, and in addition to Solomon Hill starting and only playing like 8 or 10 minutes. So one thing, keep an eye on the starting lineup tonight. You might get Herter starting in place of Hill. But either way, you saw minutes open up, more minutes for Bogdanovich, for Herter, for Gallinari. And Bogdanovich, this postseason's averaged 0.91 DraftKings points per minute. He's been between 0.9 and 1 fantasy points per minute for the season. He's averaged 36.5 minutes per game in the postseason. Like I said, played 41 last game. I think there's a good chance you're getting 38, 39 minutes from him here. 6,400 is a really, really good price tag for someone that has a chance to play 40 minutes, regardless of who they are. And Bogdanovich isn't a bad player. He also leads this team both in the regular season and the postseason in catch and shoot attempts per game. We're going back to that Trae Young conversation. If you do think that Ben Simmons and Matisse Thybulle are going to have success taking shots away from Young, limiting what he's doing, he's going to make plays for other guys, and you're going to get catch and shoot attempts for Herter, for Gallinari, for Bogdanovich, again, leads the team. So I think that 6,400 for Bogdanovich is a very good salary. Kevin Herter, played 28 or 29 minutes in the first game, played about 35 minutes last game. I'm not banking on 35 minutes again, but I think there's a pretty good chance that you're getting like 30 to 32. If he starts, I'd feel even better about that. But another guy that is just going to, for the Hawks to have success, he's going to get opportunities to knock down some open looks from the outside. He's still cheap enough. He's another guy that's averaged like 0.85 to 0.9 fantasy points per minute. He's not a very good NBA player, but from a DFS standpoint, what he does translates to fantasy points, and it does it at a high enough rate that his salary, I think he's a pretty good option. Gallinari in that same boat, a little bit more expensive, likely to play a few less minutes, also likely to be a little bit lower owned, so you can go there in tournaments. And then, you mentioned John Collins. He's someone who, him and Capela both actually, have produced at a much lower level in the postseason from a fantasy standpoint than they did during the regular season. And we talk a lot about not being afraid to go back to guys like that. I'm a little more concerned on Capela and Collins because you're not talking about guys that are shooting poorly. You're talking about guys who have seen their usage rate and their rebound percentage both just slashed from the regular season. Capela had almost a 20% usage rate in the regular season. He's down around 12.5% for the postseason. His rebounding percentage has gone from 26% to 20%. John Collins has seen his usage rate go from north of 20% in the regular season down to about 15.5, 16% in the regular season, in the postseason. Rebounding percentage has dropped a couple of points as well. But the thing that makes them reasonable options still is that it's twofold. One, they're playing more minutes per game. Capela's averaging about 33 minutes per game in the postseason compared to 30 in the regular season. Collins is averaging about 31 minutes per game, but he had that one game against the Knicks where he fouled out in 16 minutes. He's played 34 and 35 minutes in this series. As long as he doesn't get in foul trouble, I'm expecting another 33, 34 minutes. And we know that both of these guys are capable, one, of putting up really big numbers just based on what we've seen in the past. Just because their rates are down so far in the postseason doesn't mean they have to be again tonight. But also, their salaries come down and the minutes have gone up. So you can afford to have a little bit less production, especially at power forward, where, again, I think optimal build is going to be paying down a bit. Collins is going to be a pretty useful option. I'm just willing to take my chances at that price point.
Is there anybody 3K? I mean, can you punt on Lou Williams? You mentioned Maxey's going to be a little 3,500. My goodness, I can't even go. I'm a fan of this team, and I can't even look at the idea of playing George Hill. So is there anybody in like that low range that you think you could, and maybe it is George Hill, and I'll defer to you, but is there anybody in that range that you could go to on either side before we move to the second game?
I don't really see it. I think Lou Williams is like 1K on the showdown slate. That's where I would be looking to Lou Williams. But other than that, it's just, we've talked about it a lot. We're pretty far into the postseason now. You just don't get those same types of plays in the postseason because whereas a bench guy might play 18 minutes in the regular season, like if you're backing up Trae Young, now you're playing like 10. So it just makes it really, really hard to pay off that price tag.
Reminder here, as the show brought to you by Yahoo Sports, we have a pretty cool deal for you today. Yahoo Sports Daily Fantasy has this special deal going on. All new users of Yahoo DFS will get $30 worth of Yahoo Sports rewards points with any deposit $5 or more. Just use your promo code Awesemo. That's promo code Awesemo. You have access to a ton of great contests, including a 3K to first Yahoo single game NBA baller contest and an additional 5K MGM Vegas getaway if you take it down. So I imagine that a lot of people just on that alone, that's a pretty cool incentive right there. But again, just use our promo code Awesemo. You'll get $30 worth of Yahoo Sports rewards points. So flow tonight, right? Phoenix comes in on the road. Phoenix has been a pretty good cover team on the road all year. But, you know, Denver's been so down when they've been down. They've looked strong in order to get here in wins. Well, we'll, I guess, have to factor in minutes now for Will Barton coming back. But again, similar to how we looked at game one, Adam, how do you see the flow here coming? I know that it's a short line and we're expected to believe that Phoenix has a shot here. If Denver looks strong, then maybe they can pull this away. I don't hate the Suns winning this game outright, but I'm just curious how you feel the kind of game flow will be before we start looking at plays.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with the line. Like, I think Denver probably wins because, you know, they are at home, but Phoenix has very clearly looked like the better team in the first couple of games. Chris Paul appears to be fully healthy, which of course is a huge thing for this team. So, you know, yeah, it wouldn't be shocking if they pulled one out, but I don't see anything like crazy about the line.
Yeah, no, I don't feel like this is a blowout. I mean, I guess like Denver playing at their height, you could definitely see some pressure on Phoenix simply because, look, you're up. It's natural game 3. You've already done what you need to do at home to this point. So I could see that to some regard. And I don't know if that ever factors in right now where it's not blowout mode that you have to factor in. It's kind of like, you know, up 14, up 16, where you're up, or pardon me, down 14-16, where you're already up 2-0 in game 3. And you're kind of like, all right, we're up in this series. We can kind of pull back a little bit and get back ready for game 4.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't expect to see that at like 14 or 16, especially if we're talking, you know, early fourth quarter. Maybe they get pulled, you know, with 4 or 5 minutes left instead of 1 minute left, like they would if this were like a must-win game. But it's not enough for me to really worry about it from a fantasy standpoint. I expect this to be a competitive enough game that we get full or close to full minutes from these guys.
Chris Paul clearly doesn't look injured or to where we had these concerns about the shoulder. It's kind of like Embiid's knee, right? Although, to be fair to Paul, he doesn't even have any tag or letter associated with him. So let's start on the road here and the backcourt. Are you looking to get exposure to both Booker and Paul in the backcourt for some lineups tonight?
Yeah, I'll start with Paul. He's one of my favorite plays on the entire slate, especially 7,100 on DraftKings. You're still getting a pretty sizable discount for what he did in the Lakers series, where 1, he was playing a team that defends better than the Nuggets do, and 2, he was playing with a shoulder that he like couldn't move. He appears to be fully healthy now. He's playing full minutes, played like 35 and a half minutes in game 1, lost a couple minutes to garbage time, played like 30 minutes last game, lost a ton of minutes to garbage time, and he's playing really well. He's averaged 1.5 fantasy points per minute through the first 2 games of this series. You're, of course, not expecting him to sustain that rate, but during the regular season, he averaged 1.24 DraftKings points per minute. In that Lakers series, he averaged 0.94 DraftKings points per minute. He's basically still priced to be scoring around a fantasy point per minute and playing maybe 30 minutes, 30, 31 minutes. Like, now you have basically a full strength Chris Paul at a reduced price tag. He's the highest projected owned guy on DraftKings right now, but I still think he's just one of the best plays. Just way too good for his salary. And then you get to Booker, who I still think is a little bit underpriced. His production isn't likely to be quite as good as Chris Paul's on a per minute basis. It wasn't during the regular season. It hasn't been in the postseason, if you account for Paul's injuries, but he's also going to play more minutes. Booker's been one of the leaders in minutes per game this postseason. You're likely to get 40 to 42 minutes from him if this game's competitive. He's going to go out there and shoot a lot. He's going to have a 30+% usage rate more often than not. So I still think he's a little bit underpriced. I just think that, especially on DraftKings in particular, Chris Paul is more underpriced than Booker is. On FanDuel, I think that it's closer. They're the same salary, but I think give a slight edge to Chris Paul.
I know Showdown Captain Mode. I mean, the guy has tremendous value because of how cheap he is. But before we get to guys in the middle, I'm just curious to flip it on the complete opposite end of it. Can you work Torrey Craig in some lineups tonight, knowing that he's such a cheap option and is still going to get an opportunity for some minutes?
Yeah, so I wanted to correct myself. I have Booker slightly ahead at the same price on FanDuel, but I like both a lot. Yeah, as far as Craig goes, if you are doing the, pay up for a couple of guys and just like pray for the best from some cheap guys, Torrey Craig is one guy I wouldn't mind doing it with. He's actually produced at a really high level all season long, which is weird for Torrey Craig, but it's been the entire season, and it's continued into the postseason where he's averaged over a fantasy point per minute. He has almost a 20% rebounding percentage in the postseason. He's just doing a lot of things really, really well. You're most likely only going to get 13, 14, 15 minutes from him, which is going to mitigate, of course, his upside. But if Jay Crowder gets in foul trouble, if Mikal Bridges gets in foul trouble, you certainly could see Craig, especially if he's playing well, pick up a few more minutes. So there is at least a path to him having success. He's another one where I think on showdown slates is going to be really useful. But even on the main slate, if you are, insisting on going stars and scrubs, despite there being no scrubs, Craig is at least a guy, Torrey Craig, Paul Millsap. Those are guys where they produce when they have some path to more minutes, some somewhat realistic path to more minutes. Whereas a lot of these guys is just like outside of a star ahead of them getting hurt, there's nothing that is going to get them on the floor more.
So you mentioned Bridges, and I'm just curious specifically there. I like him. I want to get to him. 4,900 doesn't seem like it's too much for the expected return there on DraftKings, Adam.
Yeah, I really like the salary on DraftKings specifically for Bridges. 6,100 is a bit tougher on FanDuel, but you're going to get, assuming this game's competitive, typically you're getting around 34 minutes or so from Mikal Bridges, a 0.8 fantasy point per minute guy in the regular season, a little bit lower in the postseason, but not much. The math is pretty easy there. Like if you're getting 34 minutes from the guy and he's scoring around 3/4 of a fantasy point per minute, he's giving you pretty good production at $4,900. I think it's just a price tag that is a little bit too cheap, especially going back to the point that I've made a couple of times already, that I think the best spots to pay up are going to be at the guard spots and at the center spot. So you're looking to save some money at forward, and then you just have Mikal Bridges sitting there.
Yeah, I mean, realistically, if you were getting to a lineup where you were spending up outside of Booker, and you wanted to work in a couple of Suns here, a Bridges, Crowder, Paul type scenario where you're working those three in, Paul clearly at the top, but again, 7,100, both of those guys right around 5K. So at the very least, they're workable from a salary standpoint. Do you feel similarly with Crowder than you do with Bridges?
Yeah, I think they project almost the same. Of course, you're paying $200 more on DraftKings for Crowder, but he is $600 less on FanDuel. So probably a little bit easier to get to on FanDuel, but I still feel fine about Crowder. On average, he's going to play, a minute or two less than Mikal Bridges. They produce at a similar rate. But Crowder, it's a very, very, very similar play to Bridges, where you're not necessarily getting consistent production because both of them are so far behind Paul and Booker in terms of, usage rate and what they need to do offensively, but they contribute enough in the way of rebounds. They contribute enough scoring. They get enough, knock down enough threes that more often than not, they're just going to come in right around 5x their salary. If one of them shoots hot from three, they'll obviously do better, but you're just not taking on a ton of risk at that salary as long as they can avoid foul trouble.
So crunching lineups here, from 20 to 500, depending on how far deep you want to go. This is where I'm curious to get your response. Now, I'm using our own projections here, meaning Awesemo's, not yours, Adam, in your advanced approach to it. But I'm curious, just looking at Ayton on the surface, appears to have a pretty good matchup. Jokic is not going to shut anybody down as far as defensively is concerned. At the same time, just getting to him as a center or in a flex spot on DraftKings seems increasingly difficult because of the slate. If it's Jokic, if it's Embiid, or if it's a cheaper option, even working John Collins into that 5 spot. So my question is why? Why is it so hard for me on Cruncher tonight to get to Ayton in my lineups?
Because you probably have, and I haven't looked at our projections. I'm guessing we have Michael Porter Jr. projected higher than DeAndre Ayton. I know I do. So that's one reason, because you're going to get a build where at center, you're going either Jokic or Embiid to get those raw points into your lineup. And then in the utility spot, a lot of times you're going to end up in that 7K range, but Chris Paul projects higher. Michael Porter Jr. projects higher. So those guys are going to show up before Ayton. That is one spot, though, that you can look to exploit in tournaments, because realistically, the range of outcomes, especially between Porter Jr. and Ayton, Chris Paul, I think, is on a different level. Again, just, I think is one of the best plays on the slate. But when you, especially looking at Ayton and Porter, the range of outcomes is about the same. Like, nobody would be surprised if Michael Porter Jr. ends up being healthy and goes out and scores 40 fantasy points. But nobody will be surprised if Ayton plays 38 minutes and scores 40 fantasy points either. You get a very similar range of outcomes there. So you probably shouldn't have a huge ownership gap there. Right now, we have 32% going to Porter, only 22% going to Ayton. I do think in tournaments, that's a spot you can, look to exploit, especially if you're someone that just plays a few lineups. And so you're not trying to get too far off of the main course, but you do want to make some pivots. I think the Porter to Ayton one is a pretty good one.
And I imagine, and you referenced this earlier, you answered the question, and I saw it pop up a couple of times since on the chat. So I'll bring it back to where we began with the lesser centers, if you will, on the slate, not the Jokic and Embiids, but the Capela and Aytons here. And just to your point, the ownership is pretty much dead on. So does cost now become a mitigating factor in choosing which one of these guys you would go to sooner?
Sorry, what was that?
For Capela or Ayton, as far as looking, especially on DraftKings, where we're not talking about locking into one center position.
Yeah, and especially because they're projected for essentially the same ownership, both 22%. The first spot that I look in a situation like that is the ownership. But yeah, I mean, so far in the postseason, you've gotten similar production. They're both players that have produced at a lower rate from a fantasy standpoint in the postseason than they did during the regular season. We obviously already talked about it with Capela, but Ayton's at like 0.91 fantasy points per minute in the postseason compared to 1.1 during the regular season, but he's also playing huge minutes. Ayton's someone that was playing like 32 minutes in the regular season. Now you're getting 37, 38 minutes pretty often in competitive games. And they're going to want him out there against Jokic as long as he's able to avoid foul trouble. So I think the ceiling for Capela and Ayton is pretty similar. I do give a slight edge to Ayton just because I do think on average he plays, 4 or 5, somewhere between 3 and 5 minutes more than Capela does.
All right, we got about 12 minutes or so here before lock. EMac and Greg take over. So we don't ask much, right? Hit us up with a like. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel, the $29.95 weekly package at Awesemo Plus. And as you see right there at the top, everything here brought to you tonight by Yahoo, Yahoo DFS, Yahoo Fantasy, and you can take full advantage of the $30 that we have for you just using our promo code Awesemo. Let's start not with Jokic, actually. Let's start with an interesting factor that's now been added to the fold here. Will Barton. How do you anticipate Will Barton's impact? Is 15 to 20 minutes even enough to roster him tonight?
I don't think it's enough because he's not really cheap. It would be one thing. It would be really, really interesting if he was like $4,000. But he's $4,900 on Fanduel. He's $5,500 on DraftKings. The one thing that kind of intrigues me, they came into last game saying, I think he was going to play like 12 to 18 minutes or something like that. He played really well. Like, he came out of the gate playing really, really well. They interviewed Michael Malone at halftime and kind of said, how hard is it going to be if you not to really push Barton? And he said something along the lines of, we need to think long term. I don't know for sure if they continue thinking long term now that they're down 2-0. If Barton's playing well and Barton says he feels good, I think there's a chance that they throw a few more minutes to him. But again, that's why he'd be interesting to me at like 4K. At 5,500, considering what Will Barton normally produces, he's, like a 0.85, 0.9 fantasy point per minute guy. It's not like you're talking about, 1.2 fantasy points per minute. At 5,500, you would still kind of need him to play 25, 30 minutes. That's asking a lot. That's asking more than him getting a couple of extra minutes because he's playing well. So it just makes it really, really tough. I do think it makes the other backcourt options on Denver a little bit riskier, but they're still viable because I do still expect the hot hand situation there. You saw about 30 minutes from Campazzo last game minus garbage time. So he was again on pace to play a lot of minutes. Austin Rivers is the guy that I expect to lose out the most because he should be. But you've also seen Monte Morris really, really struggle to shoot in this series, whereas in the previous series, he shot incredibly well, was in a bunch of tournament winning lineups during that series. That's a situation where his salary increased because he shot well during that series and because, he played really well. So it naturally makes him overpriced right now from a median projection. But I had someone message me in Slack earlier because I didn't mention Morris in the deep dive because I don't think he's a particularly good play. But he asked, can you go to him in tournaments? And I think he's the perfect kind of guy where, people are going to play Seth Curry. People are going to play, Kevin Huerter, these 5K guys. none of them are that good. And if Monte Morris is knocking down his shots, there are minutes available still. You can still very easily see a closing lineup of Campazzo, Morris, Porter, Gordon, and Jokic, or, Rivers, Morris, whatever it may be, if he's playing well. So I think that he's overpriced in terms of his median projection. I think he's an awful play in cash games, for example, but certainly the kind of guy where if you're playing tournaments, you can look there and just say, yeah, he might not play as many minutes as I would like, but if that's the case, he probably wasn't playing really well anyway, in which case it doesn't matter. My team with him already sucks. If he's playing really well, there are still minutes available.
I saw a question, or maybe more of a point made by Corey Balmer. And no, in the chat, this is not him referring to me as Stone Cold in the beginning of the show. Although, look, I haven't looked like that in years, so maybe it's just a face up. I'll take any compliment I can get, and even if it was meant as a rip, look at me. All right, I'll take that as a compliment. Here's what he said though, and look, not to this extent, I don't think, as far as across the board. And ownership, I think, plays a role, but I'm always curious as far as where the rubber meets the road for you on ownership, where ownership now becomes more of a mitigating factor of where to fade, not across the board, but maybe on one or two smaller lineups. And we know CP3 on this slate is going to be super high owned. In smaller scenarios, can you work to a pivot with Campazzo, knowing at the very least the guy's going to be out there for 35 minutes?
Yeah, I mean, Paul's not really the guy that I'd want to be pivoting to with Campazzo, but I think Campazzo is in that conversation where the minutes are certainly there if he plays well. The assist numbers have been very good, both in his time just filling in for Jamal Murray in general and in the postseason. So the path is there for the minutes from an upside standpoint. But again, he's not the same price either. But just like comparing him to Paul, it's tough just because Paul's ceiling is so much higher. But to go back to your more broad question about the ownership, that's where the boom bust tool really comes in handy, because it gives you a sense of how often these players are going to be in the optimal lineup. For example, Chris Paul on DraftKings right now, projected for 51% ownership. There are for sure people watching this show saying, I'm not going to roster Chris Paul tonight. I don't think he's a good play because he's 51% owned. He has a 55% chance of being in the optimal lineup based on our numbers and Alex's simulations, which actually means he's not high enough owned. So you have to keep in mind that the numbers are relative. You can't just look at them and say, oh, that guy's too popular, that guy's not popular enough. And then also, just as kind of one caveat to that, one spot to pay a little bit more attention to ownership is when you're talking about particularly volatile situations, like, for example, Michael Porter Jr., where we really don't know we don't exactly know how to project him because we don't know how he feels. If we knew he's 100%, we know exactly how to project Michael Porter Jr.'s rates and his per minute production, but we don't know how he feels. So he could actually be a much worse player than we realize. So situations like that, where there's injury, like significant injury risk, or where, someone in the case of Rajon Rondo last night, where he might play 20 minutes and he might not come off the bench. If guys like that are really popular, you can just look and say, okay, I'm just going to hope that he doesn't come off the bench. If they're not being owned at all, you can say, okay, whatever, I hope he plays 20 minutes, because you're just understanding how volatile the range of outcomes is.
All right, two on the Nuggets here, and we can kind of go in order as far as cost is concerned. And you want to talk about a completely volatile performance from game one to game two. It's now going into game three, spending $5,400 on DK for Aaron Gordon. Are you prepared to live that life tonight?
It's like I think it's like the perfect price point. He's not overpriced. He's not underpriced. I don't really want to play him. I'm not going to be upset if I get some. Like, I don't think he's a markedly worse play than Mikal Bridges or Jay Crowder. I think both of those guys project a little bit higher, but they'll probably also get a little bit more ownership. I just think, you can expect about 30 minutes from Aaron Gordon. You can project him. You can expect him on average to get like 0.85 DraftKings points per minute is what he's averaging in the postseason. He's in games that have been competitive. He's pretty much ranged from like 28 to 33 minutes. He just doesn't have to do a lot from a fantasy standpoint on this team, but he's still a good enough player where he's not like a complete zero. So he's just sort of there for me. Like, again, in cash, I would expect, at least in cash, or if I'm playing like one lineup on DraftKings, I'd expect to be getting to Bridges and or Crowder before I get to Gordon. But Gordon, Campazzo, to a lesser extent Morris, all in that range where it's just none of the guys in that 5K range are great. It's just you're talking about guys that project like 2 or 3 points differently. And in reality, that's very, very close to a coin flip.
Did Austin Rivers' number drop? I know it dropped a little bit from game 2. It's just under 4K. Is that a workable number for you, knowing that the guy's probably not going to get you 60 fantasy points tonight, Adam?
I have a really hard time getting the Rivers even at that salary. Again, it depends what you're doing with your lineup. Like, he starts to show up pretty frequently if I insist on having Embiid and Jokic, and there is a path to minutes for him. He played 24, 25 minutes last game, looked like he was on pace to play 30 to 32 had the game not been a blowout. So the path is still there. The problem is every single player on this team is picking up stats ahead of Austin Rivers, unless you just happen to luck into the game where he shoots like 8 of 9 from 3, like he does once every month or two. So it's not hard to see where the minutes come from for Rivers. It's difficult to see where the production comes from. And he is someone, now that you have Barton back, plus you have Campazzo and Morris, that not only do you have to sort of get lucky on the minutes and get him playing as many minutes as you're hoping for, you also need him to produce at a higher rate than normal to be a good play. So he's someone that I think is somewhat useful if you are going the stars and scrubs route, because the minutes probably will be there. But in terms of the lineups that I really like, he's not in them.
Millsap, though, 3,400. Is that not a better option if you were going to go cheap to just get some sort of good return?
It's kind of crazy how similarly they project, considering that I think Millsap plays about 12 minutes and I think Rivers plays 30, and and their projections are similar. I think that both they're in that same ballpark where Millsap has produced at a ridiculously high rate, 1.3 DraftKings points per minute in the postseason, massive usage rate, massive rebounding percentage. But the problem is he's basically just backing up Nikola Jokic. So you would need like foul trouble to Jokic, and then you would still need Millsap to be the one to get those minutes. But they're similar in that they have a path to success. You can put them into a stars and scrubs lineup and hope to get lucky. You just have to understand that on average, Paul Millsap's playing 12 minutes.
All right, super chat, and great way to get our attention here. Hit Adam up. We have a couple of minutes or so live before lock, though, with Greg and EMac. So make sure if you have a bunch of questions that you didn't get answered or you didn't get to here, stick around and the fellas will answer that question for you. Now, the last spot, DK single entry, Jeff Williams asks you, Adam, Capela, Ayton, or Mike Tyson's broken back?
I go Ayton there. That's kind of the situation that we were talking about before. I have Porter projected slightly higher. I think most people do. But there's that volatility. There's the question marks about his back, and then he's also higher owned than Ayton. So I think the range of outcomes is very similar. So I like getting Ayton at the lower ownership there. Capela and Ayton, you have at the same ownership. But again, I think Ayton on average plays a few more minutes than Capela. So to me, in a tournament, I'm going Ayton. Right now in cash, I'm still leaning Porter, even though it scares the hell out of me. But tournaments, I think when you're factoring in ownership there, definitely leaning Ayton.
So, I'm curious, how many times did you rewatch that spinal clip that Greg tweeted the other night?
A lot. Like I was staying at a hotel.
Mesmerizing?
Yeah, I was staying at a hotel because my AC was out, and so like I didn't have any of my streaming channels. I was watching like basketball or whatever, and I'm just sitting there watching it over and over. Like I could not stop laughing every time he said the word spinal. There
are two amazing elements of this video. First is how like he gets closer and almost like gets into the mic, all confident about I broke my back, and then Jim Gray is like seriously asking him, was it the vertebrae? Like, dude, you don't break your back a week before a professional fight,
right? Yeah, and then he was very confident that spinal was going to answer the question.
Yes. Maybe Michael Porter Jr. hits you with that. Anybody that we missed here, low end? I mean, hey, we didn't mention Dario Saric tonight, Adam.
Yeah, so JaMychal Green, before I close it out on Saric, JaMychal Green, I think, is the best sub 4K play on the slate. He's played at least 20 minutes in 5 straight games. He's averaged a little over 0.8 fantasy points per minute in the postseason. I say best loosely because he still projects for less than 20 fantasy points, and I expect that he will get ownership because he projects as a very good point per dollar option. But in terms of levels of confidence, like if I have to go to one guy below 4K in a cash lineup or in a single entry lineup, Green's the first guy I'm getting to. As far as Saric goes, you kind of need Ayton foul trouble for him to be a play on the main slate because he's not going to play minutes alongside Ayton, but he is someone you can look to again on the showdown slate where he opens up some value. He's a good, per minute guy, just like Paul Millsap is. It's just kind of the same thing where he's only playing minutes when the starting center is off the floor and the starting center plays huge minutes.
I can't tell if I'm being trolled or if they're seriously asking about Matisse Thybulle one more time.
I do want to mention someone said JaMychal Green's minutes could get reduced some too. They definitely could, because even though Will Barton doesn't play the same position, you can definitely see lineups now where it's easier to get more minutes from Gordon and Porter both at the 4. So, again, I'm leaning towards Green playing 20, 22 minutes, but it wouldn't be surprising if you just get a rotation that's bad for Green. He plays like 16.
Yeah, T from Loke, that was not even Mike's best post-fight in-ring interview. I think it was his best post-fight in-ring interview. You did have to eat your children, but I hit you with that Russ Salzberg where he's being interviewed, and he was just like, you don't like it? Turn off your fucking station.
Yeah, it was great.
All right. No, don't do that here. Stick around for Live Before Lock. EMac and Greg, Mr. Spinal in the house, taking all your questions, getting you ready at ShipMyMoney DFS, as you already know how you follow Adam. Thanks to Tyler. For Adam, Scherer, Eytan Shander, we are back tomorrow morning, right?
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure you knew.
Yep. I'm aware, and I will keep that in mind tonight.
AC, brother. That's the only thing on your mind is air conditioner. Get that sucker fixed.
Yeah, need to get that taken care of.
Have a great night, everybody. Live Before Lock next.
Awesemo, here we go. It's your old pal EMac, and I'm joined by one Greg Ehrenberg as we get you ready for NBA Live Before Lock. Greg, it has been like a month since I've done an NBA show. Thank goodness I write an NBA article every single day that's free in front of the paywall. That is DFS Building Blocks, and we do highlight a section specifically on the Yahoo Discount Dandies, as well as the Yahoo Play of the Day. Guess what? We are sponsored by Yahoo for this 90-minute block. We're going to stay an extra 30 minutes, talk about the late game. They have dabbled in single game contests. We'll talk on that. We'll talk on the main slate. Greg, how have you been? It's been a hot minute since I've chatted with you.
Hey, EMac 2024. It's been a minute since we've done a show together for sure. The last time we did was that late night show where we closed out the late night swap, spit, and whatever, all the S adjectives that went along with that show. And yeah, we closed it out. The last thing I did was kind of roast you on that a little bit to close. It was a lot of fun. But yeah, we used to do a bunch of shows together and our schedules just don't overlap anymore.
It's true. I've gone just to MLB for the shows. I see some people are asking. They haven't seen me forever. Hey, I do 3 MLB shows per weekend. So check those out. We have the MLB strategy show on Saturday morning. On Saturday evening, we have Live Before Lock. We're getting bumped a little earlier for some of these NBA contests. We've got a stretch. Tomorrow's a 1-game NBA slate. We have a stretch of 3 more 2-game slates. And then, of course, we have the Sunday MLB Live Before Lock. And before you know it, we're going to be down to just MLB, and football, I believe, is 8 weeks away from today, someone was saying. Is that true?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't looked at it. Like,
feels more like 12. Oh, they said in 8 weeks you'll see football on your TV. That must be preseason, right? Because that would be August, not September.
I don't look at my schedule past like 3 days, so I couldn't tell you exactly what date it is. Right now, I'm focused on the NBA playoffs. Football, I'm sure that's coming down the road. I know we're starting football content up soon, but yeah, right now I'm pretty locked into the NBA playoffs.
So you say you don't look ahead, yet you are the master of betting futures, betting postseason hardware trophies, series bets. Greg, come on, you have your eye on everything. You are the man, myth, and legend here behind Awesemo.
I do like to bet futures a lot. Although there aren't any specific ones I see a lot of value in right now. If I had to bet one, it would still be the Sixers series line against the Hawks. They're like minus 220, minus 230, somewhere around there. Most books, I still think that's a little bit of value. But other than that, even futures, a lot of the ones I'm betting, it's because it's like, hey, I think this number is going to change in the next few days. A lot of times I'm looking for odds value, but it's not always that I think like, oh, this is a lock to win or this is a lock to happen. It's just, oh, these odds are wrong as of what's happening right now. Like the other one I was doing the Live Before Lock show with Josh, and we were looking at the futures MVPs for the NBA Finals, and Chris Paul was 42-1, and I thought that was too long. And then the next day he was 16-1. But I don't think it's not that I think he's a lock to win, Finals MVP. It's just that's the number was a little too long.
Yeah, I was going to ask how that one played out. That one, you said you were looking for a bit of a triple up by morning or something along those lines, a buyout option? Yeah,
I think it's like a little over 2x right now.
Okay. I always like to follow along with what you're doing there because that's an aspect I have not done. We do, of course, have our sister site that is oddshopper.com. Definitely check that out. It is a lot of fun over there as sports wagering is becoming a thing in many, many states. All right, Tyler's laughing. Oh gosh, I don't even want to go look and see what's going on in chat right now. Let's remind everybody to like and subscribe, and let's talk a little bit about today's slate. Since there are only 2 games, we will actually just cover both of them one at a time since we are going to have plenty of time. Again, we're going to go till 8 o'clock this evening, so you will want to tune in until then. Free content today, the main slate ownership for NBA. We also have the MMA fighter rankings. There is UFC 263 tomorrow. It's going to be a good one. Greg, what are you thinking here on our first game? So we have Joel Embiid, who has played hefty minutes despite dealing with a partial tear of his right meniscus. We have DeAndre Hunter, who is undergoing surgery this weekend, who also has a partial tear of his right meniscus. All partial tears are not created equal. What are we doing here with Embiid?
Yeah, so starting with Embiid, and I think this is a good place to start. So yeah, he has that tear. It is not impacting his performance on the court at all. It does not appear. He is handling massive workloads. The usage is really high. He's played, extremely well from a fantasy standpoint in a couple of games in this series. And one thing it looked like coming into the series, it looked like it was unsure if Embiid was even going to play in the series. But now, 2 games 38 minutes in game 1, scores 63 DraftKings points. Game 2 plays 35 minutes, scores 66 DraftKings points, and the minutes would have been bigger had that game been more competitive. So Joel Embiid's certainly in play here, but where we have to compare him to is Nikola Jokic. So Joel Embiid, even though we are, just focusing on this game and the Sixers right now, the way we have to look at Embiid is in comparison to Jokic, because these are two guys who are priced about the same on both FanDuel and DraftKings. They have the same position, and I personally have Jokic projected for quite a bit more fantasy points. So while I do think that Embiid is certainly in play, Jokic is the much higher priority for me, and that's how my ownership is shaping up.
Wait, so one more time. You have Embiid projected a little higher for production.
Oh, sorry. My bad. I misspoke. That's what I said. Jokic higher than Embiid. Therefore, I have Jokic.
Gotcha. Okay.
I have Jokic in more lineups. And it's not really a knock on Embiid. It has nothing to do with the health of his knee. It's just Jokic has been a better fantasy producer for most of the season. I have him for more fantasy points. So he is the higher priority pay up center for me.
All right. And myself, I'm actually going to land on the other side here. I am going to go with Embiid, despite generally being fired up for Jokic and for most of the season. I do like the numbers we've seen from Embiid. He has played 38 and 35 minutes in the last 2 games, averaging 23 field goal attempts and 15 and a half trips to the free throw line. This is culminated in 39 and a half points, 11 rebounds, 3 assists, and 3.5 combined blocks and steals. Got a little bit more of a lean towards him on Yahoo, particularly at $47 there. That is very excellent point per dollar projection. We do want to remember that point or steals and blocks are worth 3 points there, a little higher than on DK. There is no double-double bonus. He's also been taking like 3.5 or almost 4 3-pointers a game, granted 2-game sample size and all. But is he making up there for Mr. Ben Simmons, who is not shooting at all anymore?
So, I mean, it's not like Ben Simmons ever shot threes, but, one thing I think is funny is, so when the Sixers play, a lot of times the general public sentiment is, why is Ben Simmons not shooting? He's open. He should take shots. But then Giannis goes out, who's, by the way, equally as poor of a shooter as Ben Simmons. Giannis starts taking 3-pointers, or he goes, why the hell is he shooting? So, right, it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't. The reality is neither one of them are good shooters, and they're going to get criticized no matter what. If Ben Simmons shoots more threes, he's not going to make them. He's not good at it. Then you have a Giannis situation where it's like, hey, this guy's shooting a lot of threes. He can't make them. Why is he shooting them? I prefer the Ben Simmons school of thought, where it's, hey, take the efficient shots. If you could make them, take them. If you can't make them, don't take them.
Unless you're Russell Westbrook, of course.
Right. Russell Westbrook is in a different stratosphere in terms of at least he makes them on occasion. He should shoot them less, but I mean, he's still a much better 3-point shooter than Simmons or Giannis.
All right, just uploaded the MLB lineups. I'm all set. We've got some showdown stuff today for NBA, so we're going to be talking a little bit of the single game content. They do have single game content or game contests over there on Yahoo. Key thing that you guys want to remember today is we have a nice little Yahoo promo here. I saw we did an update, so let me go chase that one down quickly. But let's turn it over a little bit to the remainder of the backcourts here. So one of the plays that I think is a risky one today is going to be Trae Young, if only because there are a variety of players that Philadelphia can send to kind of cool him off. We've seen Danny Green, when he gets burned, in comes Matisse Thybulle. We've got Ben Simmons in the mix as well. They just have a variety of guys that can serve to slow down Trae Young. This does not mean Trae Young is a bad play. However, on FanDuel, where we have to play 2 point guards and there are basically 4 to choose from, we have some decision points and game within the game. Are you playing on the blue side today, as Terry likes to say?
So I only have lineups on DraftKings. However, I always, even if I'm only playing on one site, I have my projection set for both sites, and I build lineups as if I was playing on both, just so when I look at the numbers here, I have lineups in front of me, and I can say like, hey, this is what my preferences are on both sites. So yeah, I'm definitely opinionated on it, even though I only have lineups on DraftKings today.
All right. So how would you approach Trae Young and the point guard position in particular on FanDuel while we're talking about this game? Because obviously we have Chris Paul as a nice option. Then you have Ben Simmons sort of as a throw your hands in the air, gets 3 points for blocks and steals. He's not really going to, does he get double-digit points? We shall see. He's going to get some rebounds and stuff, but it's an interesting conundrum that we have here. And if you go away from Trae Young, that means you're definitely upgrading potentially to a Tobias Harris or someone else that may get lost in the wash here when people spend on a center and spend on 2 point guards. How do you see that construction lining up for these gigantic large field tournaments?
Sure. So Trae Young, I'll address him on both sides. So starting with Fanduel, because that was what you were just referencing, I think that Trae Young is going a little bit over-owned. We currently have Trae Young appearing in about 50% of projected lineups right now. That is a substantial amount of ownership going to Trae Young. I understand why the field is getting there. Just my preference is to pay up for center. And so Trae Young, while he's in my player pool, just not quite as much as the field in the build I have. My preference at point guard is to go to Chris Paul. I think a lot of people know by now that I am a mark for the Suns and Chris Paul. And listen, I mean, 8,200 for Chris Paul, not a problematic price tag for me. And I have no concerns at all about the health of his shoulder at this point. He's looked terrific when he's been out on the court, and his last couple of games, over 40 fantasy points, no real limitations. He's shooting threes again, which was something that he was not doing when he was injured against the Lakers. So all that considered, I think that Chris Paul going up against the backcourt, that's Facundo Campazzo and Austin Rivers, it is a much easier matchup for him than what somebody like Trae Young is going up against with Ben Simmons. And something also that's going to matter a little bit for Trae Young that you mentioned there is that there was a pretty big shift that the Sixers made defensively against him in game 1 to game 2. Game 1, they opened with Danny Green on him. That went extremely poorly. And then last game, they went with Ben Simmons on him, and that made life a lot more difficult for Trae Young. And I expect that's going to be the case going forward as long as Ben Simmons stays out of foul trouble. So Trae Young, to me, is worth going underweight to the field on, and Chris Paul overweight in that same kind of price-ish range.
All right, and that's Chris Paul is looking good. We'll talk about his assist props here at some point when we get over to that game. I'm sort of on the same boat as you. The other guy I like is Kevin Huerter coming into this one. He is sort of so if you're going to play Trae Young or not play Trae Young, you almost want to have Huerter or especially Bogdanovic in those lineups, just because the thought being, well, if Young's not doing as well, hopefully one of those other two guys is. Huerter is he's basically when Young is out and Bogdanovic is running the point, Huerter's usually in there as the other guard. Lou Williams kind of an afterthought in all of this. So I don't think Huerter is fully priced in for if we see the same rotation we saw in particular with that last game. Now that we know DeAndre Hunter's out, he's not going to come in and muck things up. How do you feel about the other guard/wings there for Atlanta?
Yeah, so Kevin Huerter, to me, he's somebody who's a vastly different play on FanDuel and DraftKings. So FanDuel is priced at 5,300, and I think he's about appropriately owned. We're seeing him at about 25% ownership, popping up in projected about a quarter of lineups. Whereas we could pay up for Devin Booker. Bogdanovic is only $1,500 more expensive. So to me, the priority plays at shooting guard on FanDuel are going to be Devin Booker and Bogdanovic. On DraftKings, though, we have more positional flexibility, and Kevin Huerter's at 4,700 as compared to 5,300. That's where I see Kevin Huerter as a really essential play. I have him in right around half my lineups right now. And to me, I think that especially now that we don't have there's no more DeAndre Hunter. You would open by saying that DeAndre Hunter torn meniscus. He's having surgery. He's out for the postseason. We've seen a lot more minutes go to Kevin Huerter. Huerter played 36 minutes last game, 29 minutes the game before. Even though Solomon Hill started last game, he only played a few minutes and then was pretty much a non-factor. So Kevin Huerter is the guy who's benefiting the most from no DeAndre Hunter in the lineup.
All right, I want to give you guys the Awesemo/Yahoo promotions. So Yahoo tonight, today only, everybody, not just new depositors, not just new accounts, everybody can get $10 worth of Yahoo Sports Rewards points. Those are YSRPs that can be used into any contest. You will get $10 from Yahoo if you deposit $5. And you just have to use the promo code Awesemo10. Again, that promo code is Awesemo10. And when you deposit with Yahoo tonight, $5, they will give you $10 in the YSRPs. You're going to want to check that out. You're basically doubling up your money tonight with zero risk. Everybody is eligible for this. Now, they also have a $20,000 baller for the 2-game slate with an additional $5,000 MGM Vegas getaway at top if you take that down. And then, as we mentioned, they do have single-game slates. We'll be staying on until 8 o'clock covering their second single-game slate for this one. So definitely check that out. That is Awesemo10. Put in $5 today on Yahoo, today only, and they will double that. They'll give you $10 in Yahoo Sports Rewards points. All right, Greg, anything else that you would like to highlight in this game? Perhaps a little Clint Capela. Does your heart beat out of your chest for any of the forwards here that look a little bit discounted? John Collins is someone that is a little bit crazy. What do we got here?
Yeah, so we didn't discuss Shake Milton at all. And to me, he's a pretty important play on this slate, especially at his current projected ownership. So Shake Milton, I tend to think he's going to be higher owned than what our projections show right now. We have Shake Milton, unless there's an update, he was projected for 5% ownership. I'm just going to refresh this right now to see if that still holds true. So Shake Milton on DraftKings, still projected for 5% ownership. Shake Milton on Fanduel is projected for also 5% ownership. Given the price difference, he's a stronger play on DraftKings than Fanduel. But Shake Milton was basically out of the 76ers rotation. And last game, he was a hero for them. Ended up coming off the bench and played 14 minutes, scored 21 DraftKings points. Obviously, that point per minute production isn't going to be the same. But I think he played so well last game that he's likely earned himself a bigger role in the rotation. I gave Shake Milton 18 minutes today. And that doesn't make him the greatest play in the world, but it makes him worth rostering more than 5% at such a cheap price when we have guys like Jokic and Embiid to pay up for. I mean, if the field is really only there at 5%, I think that people are way overestimating what happened earlier in the playoffs with Shake Milton. I think he played himself into a bigger playoff role last time out. So I currently have him in 20% of my lineups. That is about 4x the field. And I think that he's going to be a guy who plays, somewhere in the neighborhood of 18 minutes, 20 minutes, maybe even off the bench. And that makes him still one of the better value plays on the slate, not because I go out and expect him to score, 25 fantasy points or anything, but just because the other value options are so crappy.
All right. You know what's crappy, Greg? 1,500 people watching, not even 300 likes. I guess I'm just going to have to do a promo read here. So you guys can get access to Awesemo Plus and all of the great content for nearly every DFS sport out there with the Awesemo Plus weekly pass for $29.95. This includes full access to all of the premium content and tools at Awesemo, including player projections, ownership projections, our premium Slack channel, lineup builder, and much, much more. If you're a new user of Awesemo Plus Platinum, then you can take advantage of this promo code that I'm going to tell you right now. It's NBA Live Before Lock. All caps, one word, NBA Live Before Lock, to get 15% off your first week of Awesemo content. I do want to point out that Euro 2020, yes, that is Euro 2020, not Euro 2021, Euro 2020, because that was what the branding is. That soccer tournament launched today. We do have premium projections for that. You can either get that through the soccer package, or if you are Awesemo Premium Plus, promo code NBA Live Before Lock gets you 15% off your first week for new users. All right, John Collins, Clint Capela. Feels like you're saving the best for last, or are you avoiding talking about them?
So here's the issue I have with Clint Capela is at the center position. My priorities are rostering Nikola Jokic or Joel Embiid. So Clint Capela, to me, very low priority play. I have him way underweight to the field now. I don't have him 0%, but I have him only in a couple of lineups. So to me, Clint Capela is not a very desirable play at the center position. He is 16% of lineups right now on DraftKings, or on Fanduel, that is. On DraftKings, Clint Capela is in 24% of lineups. To me, I think that is way too much ownership going to Clint Capela. Really tough individual matchup against Joel Embiid. So far, he hasn't really played well in the series, and it's not something I would expect to either in this kind of matchup. So center position, it's a spot I want to pay up for, but with Embiid and Jokic, not with Clint Capela.
All right, let's take a gander over at our other game here, if that is good with you, Greg.
Yeah, that is certainly fine with me. By the way, we got EMac 2024. Our guy Awesemo was posting that in the premium Slack chat.
Excellent. Yeah, he does have the best avatar in all of the DFS landscape. It is a picture of me. So, hey, good luck with that. He's been winning some contests or placing in the top handful. So always a nice opportunity there to get your name in lights. We'll talk about the Awesemo Hall of Fame in a bit. In the meantime, we have Phoenix going to Denver. They have a 2-0 lead. Denver favored by a bucket. This will be the first game on their home court in this series. Michael Porter Jr. listed as probable, been dealing with sore back, the lower back issues. This plagued him all the way back into college and actually cost him the majority of his college career there with Mizzou. That's really the only intriguing thing of note, other than one, Will Barton returned. Could see him play 15 to 20 minutes, I'm guessing, tonight. And then Aaron Gordon got a little banged up. What are you feeling here? Let's just focus for a moment on the Denver forwards, because there are some moving parts. And on a 2-game slate, we do have to make mountains out of these molehills because there's not much other differentiation and decision points that we have.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we have to talk about Jokic too much. I've made my stance clear on him. I think he's a top overall pay-up option. I love Jokic at center. Michael Porter Jr., I mean, I know you say make a mountain out of a molehill, but that injury was pretty significant in the last game, and there was no way to know how healthy he was going to be going into that game.
I'm saying we need to dive into these. There's no stone to be left unturned because there's not many stones to unturn here. So these are decision points.
And
not making light of him.
No, and I think that I still don't know what to make of Michael Porter Jr. He's really popular today. I am personally underweight to the field on him, although I've been underweight to the field on Michael Porter Jr. and on basically every slate so far in the playoffs. And sometimes it's worked out, sometimes it hasn't. But given how popular he is and how much uncertainty there is with his back, he could be healthy. He might not be healthy, but given that he's currently projected to be in over half of the field's FanDuel lineups, and on DraftKings we're projected to be in about a third of the field's lineups, I'm just so uncertain with the health of him that a chalky play like Michael Porter Jr., I'd rather just be underweight to the field on him because he looked awful the last time out. And I know, EMac, you're an elderly gentleman. You've probably had back issues of your own. Do you have any sort of read here on what you think we might see from him? Because I really don't know what to make of it, if I'm honest.
Well, hold on. Let me just take a sip of prune juice here and I collect my thoughts here, dementia and such setting in. I'm sort of ambivalent in considering matching the field on this one. He's such a dynamic player, and I hate getting the FOMO, the fear of missing out. That's one of the frustrating things, especially in the short-term slates. I really generally like to take a stand wherever the popularity is coming in. I like to go up or down. I don't really want to land on it. This one, the upside combined with potential in-game injury and downside and all of that, it has me landing kind of on the field. Now there's time to change. I actually really like Mikal Bridges, but that's not the question that we're covering right now. So this is one where I'm not really looking to press the advantage. Embiid, I want to be over the field on. Jokic, I don't mind being over the field on. Chris Paul, absolutely, I want to be over the field on. It means I got to come in under somewhere. I've picked a few spots there. I am not even really excited about, a Paul Millsap, even an Aaron Gordon, maybe a little Jermichael Green, although his price is coming up. The forwards here are just kind of a debacle for me on the Denver side. If everything plays out like it did the last game, it's a whole lot of meh. So we kind of need something wacky to happen. Foul trouble, which we can see from Porter, in-game injury, which we can see from Porter, or he's dropping all of his shots. I mean, he's kind of the linchpin for all of these. So I'm trying to land on around 25 to 30% on DK. I'm just playing DK tonight with my one hand built Yahoo lineup, but he's not in that.
And I think there's so much variance in Michael Porter Jr. and so much of it is tied to his health. And if he was low owned, then I'd say I want to be overweight just based on the variance there and trying to capture that. But given that he is really popular, we haven't projected to be the most popular play on FanDuel. The most rostered player on all FanDuel is expected to be Michael Porter Jr. And given the uncertainty with his health, that's where I just think it makes sense to be underweight to the field on that. And while he's had a couple of big playoff performances, by and large part, he hasn't been that good in the playoffs. So Michael Porter Jr., here's his box score so far in the playoffs, going back to the Portland series. 39 fantasy points, 29, 24, 8. They need a 51-point game against Portland. That was the one really big game where he scored, a million points in the first quarter. Then he scored 42, 28, and then 20 in the last game. So realistically, he's had two really strong playoff games. He's had one okay playoff game, and the rest of them have been, as EMac would say, shite at the top of the show. So, with that in mind, there's a lot of variance to Michael Porter Jr. as is. I don't know how healthy he is. He's, there's been a couple of games like the one where he scored 51 points against Portland, and I wasn't heavy on him. He definitely burned me that day. But by and large part, I feel like I've been on the right side of being underweight to Michael Porter Jr. I don't know how healthy he is today. He looks like he could barely move last time out. So he's also still listed on the injury report. He is probable, so not that I expect him to miss, but I'm not convinced he's totally 100% healthy. So underweight to the field is something that makes sense to me with Porter.
All right. Branching out from there, looking to the backcourt, sort of a three-headed monster. They're from Denver. We obviously have Chris Paul, who's looking very healthy. Devin Booker kind of making that next step, performing quite well with Chris Paul. You've got a little bit of campaign potentially. You like to tout him as the tank commander, one of the better nicknames that we've seen out there. What are we looking at from either backcourt here? Is it sort of just go with the stalwarts, which has us leaning towards Phoenix?
Yeah, so I mean, let's start. We could tie a bow on Denver and talk about their backcourt situation, because somebody who you had mentioned before, but just kind of in passing, was Will Barton. And to me, Will Barton isn't in play because I still think he's going to be pretty restricted in terms of his minutes. I gave him 20 for tonight. And Will Barton last game, he hadn't played in, let's see, he was coming off a hamstring injury. He hadn't played since April 23rd. And then finally returns last game. Minutes restriction ends up playing 16. I expect that to go up. So somewhere around 20 for me today. That's about what I think is reasonable. Now, with that said, it's not going to put him in play, but it's going to take away from guys like Campazzo. It's going to take a little bit away from Austin Rivers, Monty Morris, Marcus Howard barely played last game. I think that he's somebody who, kind of starts to fall out of the rotation now, just 11 minutes last game now that Barton's involved. So while I am not going to be rostering Barton, he also prevents how much I like some of these other guys. So Campazzo, I think just due to his price point, is viable on FanDuel. But outside of that, there's nobody that I really find all that interesting. And I wouldn't roster Campazzo on DraftKings, just FanDuel specific because of the positionality.
All right, we just got news, not unexpected, but Joel Embiid is available to play. So everything is tracking along there. We have lock coming up here in 28 minutes for the 2-game slate. Again, if you guys use the promo code Awesemo10 over there on Yahoo, you put in $5 today, they will give you $10. That is for all users. Double up your money, 5 into 10. I know that's not a lot, but it's $10 free. And unless you're Josh Engelman, who says he would refuse to even stoop to pick up a $20 bill off the ground, you're crazy if you don't take advantage of that offer. Would you stoop to pick up a $20 bill?
Absolutely. And by the way, Josh Engelman, who I know he's not watching, he can't be bothered with whatever.
Why do you think I'm on this show? Of course he's not watching.
Exactly. But Josh Engelman, who to save money wore the same contacts in his eyeballs for 5 years without ever taking them out, he wouldn't bend over to take it. I don't buy that for a second.
That I heard him tell that story, and it's just that's terrifying to me. I had LASIK, and I have had a myriad of eye issues for the last 12 years, and I can't even imagine putting anything in my eyes, let alone taking them out. I mean, good God, I have 3 of these sitting on my counter. I just go through massive amounts of eye drops. It's horrible. He didn't take his contacts out literally, like he said, it's to sleep in the entire time he has been in North Carolina, which he said is at least 12 years since he has slept a night without his contacts in. And by the way, they aren't daily wear.
No, it's
daily wear.
No, it's crazy. And by the way, like anybody who says really like what
this is a public service announcement. You only get 2 eyes.
If you see a $20 bill on the ground, pick it up, right? You're not above picking up free money. The other thing too is if you wear contacts, take them out. And I mean, especially like I just don't get the thing here. You won't bend over to pick up a $20 bill, but to save a few dollars, you'll never take your contacts out and you risk going blind for life. So yeah, I mean, what are we doing?
That saline solution, the organic kind without any of the preservatives in it, it's kind of expensive, I guess, Greg.
Yeah. And then the other thing too, contacts aren't even that expensive, right? Especially like I said this the other day, I went to Costco. I just got 6 months supply of daily contacts. And I was looking at it was $311, and I wear them every day. That's for 6 months. Like Josh is full of shit with his too. He's too big to pick up a $20 bill off the ground. Like he's Bill Gates.
All right, back to the games. Back to what we have at hand here. So the tank commander is kind of our sort of a differentiation play at this point. Does he have any value where he is currently priced, be it in the showdown slates, be it in the 2-game slates? Is there any value in either him being a little less popular? Most of the production value has been wrung out of his salary. It's sort of plateaued, I guess.
Which player did you ask me about? I kind of missed
the tank commander.
Oh, okay. So here's by the way, Campaign, who I owe an apology to. I've been making fun of this guy for sucking for years, and he's been excellent this year. So mea culpa, Campaign, who has really turned his season around. He was a guy who really just went from tanking team to tanking team at the end of seasons and would never be in the rotation. And then just at the end of the year, they'd be like, hey, we're losing. We're resting all of our guys. Here comes Campaign to play 30 minutes a night if we lose games at the end of the season. And now he's playing a very valuable role for the Phoenix Suns in the playoffs. Now, with that said, the issue with Campaign is that he has been priced up a little bit due to the extra production he had when Chris Paul was hurt. We saw Campaign play extended minutes and had a bunch of really big fantasy games. Chris Paul's healthy now. Chris Paul's playing full minutes. Chris Paul is crushing the Nuggets. And with that in mind, there just isn't as many minutes to go to Campaign because Chris Paul is the guy. So unless something happens to Chris Paul again, Campaign's going to be stuck playing somewhere around, low 20s minutes. And that really hinders the amount of upside he has at his current price point.
All right, we do have one, and this is from Maverick in the premium Slack chat. I want to have you clarify here a little bit for Will Barton. He says the Awesemo projections don't have Barton projected very well and only playing 19 and a half minutes. Any different thoughts about Barton not on the injury report? So we're kind of looking here at what is a median projection. He has been out for such a long time. It's hard to really know what's going to happen. They do have a little bit of redundancy with him, with Aaron Gordon, in that both those guys can kind of handle the ball in the pinch as sort of a non-traditional facilitator. They both can play small forward, and if the game goes small, they can play a little bit of power forward as well. So they have a lot of utility, but you can say that about a ton of the Denver guys, and we know Mike Malone tends to shake things up without any notice. So there's just inherent risk built in here. Now, fortunately, we have Greg here who specializes in figuring out where's the field going to go and where he wants to push the edges on that. Based on that question of 19 and a half minutes, not such a great projection, which is to be expected, how are you approaching Will Barton for Maverick in the premium Slack?
Yeah, I said, but I don't have Will Barton in my player pool. The more significant impact of Will Barton is just who he's taking minutes away from, making those guys not viable. So we look at Will Barton last game. You know, he played about as well as he could possibly play. He scored 18 fantasy points in 16 minutes. I do think his minutes are going to go up, but he's not priced way down for his current role. It's if he was, min price, we're looking at him sub 4K, then you start to consider him. But here are Barton's numbers for the season. He played 31 minutes per game and scored 25 Draftkings points per game in those minutes. So it's not like he's some terrific fantasy producer on a points per minute basis. And all right, so his current, 4,900 right now on Fanduel is his salary on Fanduel. On Draftkings, Barton is priced at 5,500. Now, keep in mind what I just said. In full minutes this year, Will Barton averaged 25 fantasy points in 31 minutes per game. And this is also a negative matchup. So if we had Will Barton, no minutes restriction, 30 plus minutes, I would be expecting him to score somewhere in the neighborhood of 23 fantasy points. And that in itself wouldn't be enough at his current salaries on FanDuel and DraftKings. So to me, with the minutes restriction, right, we're looking at under 20 fantasy points for Will Barton. He's just not a good play. He's priced above where he should be priced if he didn't have a restriction.
All right, remember, we are going for an extra half hour here. You have 22 minutes until lock, but we're going an extra half hour to celebrate Yahoo and their single game contests. Tonight's free content, I do want to remind you, it is the NBA main slate ownership. We also have the MMA fighter rankings, which are free. UFC 263 is tomorrow. We will have the MMA live before lock show tomorrow. We also had the MMA strategy show recorded last night. That is available on the YouTube channel now. Definitely check out Pete the Heat Rogers, as well as Jason Floyd. Our own Greg Ehrenberg has, you've actually been on a few different platforms espousing MMA knowledge, non-Awesemo related. I'm quite impressed. You are the Renaissance man when it comes to DFS sports here, Greg.
So I was on, that's the coolest thing I've gotten to do is that, because Ara Hawani follows me on Twitter, I did the ESPN MMA show for UFC, 256? When Habib Nurmagomedov fought against Justin Gaethje. I got to go on ESPN, talk with Ari Hawani, and I no longer have that ESPN connection because Ari Hawani quit working for ESPN this week. But
I was going to say that was just this week, I think.
Yeah, but that was a while ago. That was last year I did that. But yeah, that was a lot of fun.
All right. Shout out to Chad Freeland, gives us $1. If you have a question, go ahead and throw it in there. We'll catch that one for you, Chad. But we do appreciate the super chats, and thank you. Much appreciated. Dollar bills, y'all. Maverick says thank you to us in the chat. Well, you got to say thanks to Greg. He's the one doing all the heavy lifting on this one. Mikal Bridges, my sort of favorite guy. DeAndre Ayton, rather interesting. There is an Awesemo over-under prop for him on points scored. How are you feeling about, last I saw, I think it was 15 and a half. He had topped that number only once in the last 6 games, if I remember correctly, but I'm going to go see if that has updated. Let me see here. Yeah, DeAndre Ayton, only once in the last 5 playoff games has he surpassed 15 and a half points. Do you like the over or the under on that?
I do like the under. That is a number that I've him projected under by a couple of points, so I would feel pretty comfortable there. And to your point, also the recent playoff games against the Lakers and into the Denver series, 14 points, 8 points, 8 points, 20 points, and 15 points. Now, I'm a pretty big fan of DeAndre Ayton at this point in his career. He's become a much better NBA player than I ever expected coming out of the draft. And more specifically on defense, he's been, a really strong defensive player. But there's always a little bit of a concern. Number one, that he could get in foul trouble trying to guard Nikola Jokic. And the other hand, too, like you said, it's not like he's been some prolific scorer in the regular season or in the playoffs. So overall for the year, we saw him average 14.6 points per game. So I definitely shade towards the under there.
All right. Before we dive into Mikal Bridges, we did get a couple super chats. So I want to go back. We didn't mention, or at least I didn't call out specifically, Danilo Gallinari on DraftKings. JTB would like your specific thoughts on Gallinari.
Yeah, so Gallinari, I do not have very much of in my player pool. So something that I saw a couple people bring up about Solomon Hill, and I think it was P. Reg had a very funny joke that that is a hill that the Hawks are willing to die on because Solomon Hill stinks. But they are.
I approve. I love that. I'm stealing that one.
I mean, you don't have to steal it. You could just say, "Hey, it was very funny." P. Reg in the YouTube chat is who you got it from, and you give him the proper credit. But listen, even though Solomon Hill is starting and is no good and is probably not going to play a whole ton of minutes, the issue here is that just that he's in the rotation, it takes away a little bit of the appeal from Danilo Gallinari because it is somebody to give minutes to. So Gallinari hasn't played as many minutes as you would have expected from him with DeAndre Hunter out. The last 2 games without Hunter, Gallinari's played 26 and 18 minutes. So I understand last game he got very hot shooting, knocked down 5 threes, ended up scoring 21 points. But still, it's only 26 minutes for Danilo Gallinari. In the regular season, Gallinari played 24 minutes per game and averaged 22.5 fantasy points. So even if we're giving him 26 minutes, we're looking at a little over 23 fantasy points for Danilo Gallinari. And I think there's a good chance that his minutes take a step back from last game just because he played so many more minutes last game than he did the game before. So it's hard for me to see a ton of minutes upside for Gallinari, and I would rather roster Kevin Huerter personally.
All right. Chad Freeland is just contributing to the Josh Engelman Contact Fund.
I love it.
Solid. That's a worthy cause. It is actually a worthy cause. Another $5 one here from Dinez, Bogdanovic and Campaign, or Chris Paul and Austin Rivers. This is for DK high dollar tournament.
So my lean there is with Chris Paul and Austin Rivers. It's just the issue with Campaign for me. His minutes appear to be trending down, and with Chris Paul now getting healthy, I don't see those coming back. So Campaign in the last couple of games, he's played under 20 minutes in each of them, and I'll bring up the exact numbers right here. And once again, it's just a thing where those games where he played really well, that was because Chris Paul was limited, and they needed Campaign to play extended minutes. Now that Chris Paul is healthy, in the series against Denver, we have seen Campaign play 19.5 minutes and 15.5 minutes. So we have him here averaging 17.5 minutes and 15 fantasy points in 2 games in the series. And that's about what I expect from him. And he's still priced up from the time that Paul was injured.
All right. 15 minutes until lock. We've got Gallinari or Crowder. It's a $2 or $3 super chat here from Ernest Davis. Use that to branch on into Crowder. And finally, Mikal Bridges, please.
Yeah. So for me, I think you'll be happy to hear this, EMac. I have Mikal Bridges projected for more fantasy points than Jay Crowder. So one way, it's hard to differentiate on 2-game slates, and I'm not sure that this is going to be a major difference in breaking point. But if you're playing one lineup and you have enough money to get to Jay Crowder, I think it makes sense. Maybe just go to Mikal Bridges. That might get you a slightly more unique lineup. I have Bridges projected for more fantasy points. He's actually one of my favorite overall plays on the slate. So EMac, once again, celebrate that. But as for Ernest Davis's specific question, I have Jay Crowder projected for more fantasy points than Gallinari, but I prefer Mikal Bridges if he's not already in your lineup.
All right, cruising on through. Got a couple more. Super chat here from Alir YT. What are the odds that Jokic and Embiid are in the optimal lineup in your opinion? Also, EMac 2024. I would say 1 in 4 that they are both in the optimal lineup, assuming DraftKings or Yahoo, because on Fanduel, that would be a terrific feat if they could do that both at the center position.
Yeah, so it is obviously it is a DraftKings specific question on FanDuel. The answer is nil. I'll say this in my DraftKings lineups, and I'm not as mathematical about this as Josh Engelman is, because he has this Sims where he could pull up numbers and he could say that based on his numbers, this is the exact chance. I could say this though: I have Jokic and Embiid in 19.2% of my lineups together. So with that in mind, I would say probably somewhere 1 in 5 or so is what I would expect for both of them to be optimal.
All right, not too shabby from the hip there from me. I will take it. Let's see here. Anything else that we haven't covered on either of these games? I'm going to make the announcement. Chat, YouTube, Awesemo Premium Slack or Super Chats, line them up. We have 14 minutes until lock. We are staying on until 8 o'clock to cover some more of the Yahoo single game slate. Reminder, if you use the promo code Awesemo10 tonight only for anybody, put in $5, use the promo code Awesemo10. They'll give you $10 via Yahoo Sports rewards points. Those you can use immediately into any contest. Greg.
Yes, EMac.
Questions, or pardon me, what do we say? Wrap up anything that we haven't covered yet.
Well, we have some questions in the premium Slack chat we could answer. But other than that, I think we've gotten to every single.
Morris and Capazzo. Let's start off there. Morris, Capazzo, and Rivers, and then we'll work our way backwards.
I have a slight interest in Campazzo on FanDuel just because of his price point at 5,000, and it's hard to find other players around that range to be interested in. But on DraftKings, I don't really like any of them. Once again, it goes back to what we talked about with Will Barton before. The minutes that Will Barton is playing are coming from somewhere. A bunch of them are coming from Marcus Howard. The other minutes are going to come from Rivers, Morris, and Campazzo. That's what I'm expecting. So that caps the minutes upside of all of those guys. I doubt that Will Barton's going to go out and play 30 minutes, but I think he plays somewhere in the neighborhood of 20. And to me, that's just going to make it so I don't want to get to really any of those guys, specifically on DraftKings with where their prices are at. And that's going to tie into Harrison Edmonds asked in the premium Slack chat, how do I feel about Monty Morris as a contrarian play for a large field DK GPP? The problem I have with him, he's $5,000 on DK, and I don't think he's going to play a massive amount of minutes. If you look at last game with Will Barton back in the mix, Monty Morris ended up playing 22 minutes and scored 14 fantasy points. For the season, Monty Morris played 26 minutes per game and averaged 21 fantasy points. So we're looking at a guy who's not a particularly great fantasy producer. His price is near its apex, and he's probably going to play less minutes than Norman played in the regular season. So I think he's more likely to score under 20 fantasy points than over.
All right. We're getting a few questions here. Let's kind of bounce back and forth between what you're getting the premium Slack, and I'll just keep the YouTube open. Cam Johnson or Thibault tonight. Thoughts?
I don't think I really have much exposure to either of them. I have Cam Johnson in 3 lineups. I have Matisse Thybulle in 2. So with that in mind, I slightly prefer Cam Johnson. Matisse Thybulle is somebody who, if you have to roster him, he makes more sense on FanDuel than he does on DraftKings just because of the potential for defensive stats. But now that Shake Milton is also in the rotation for Philly, I'm not sure that is great for Matisse Thybulle. It's just another guy to give minutes to. So Thybulle for tonight, I don't think he's going to play a whole bunch of minutes. And was that a DraftKings or a FanDuel specific
It was
question?
not specified. I'm guessing it was DK, but.
So yeah, anyway, I don't really love either of them, but Cam Johnson, if those are the options.
All right. Anything else from premium?
So from premium, yes, we have Clintwood 83. Hey guys, how are we feeling about Michael Porter Jr.? If you talked about him, I apologize. We did, but he says he just got off work. So quick summary of Michael Porter Jr. I have no clue how healthy he is. He's listed as probable to play. I certainly expect him to play. I'm sure EMac expects him to play as well. But the back is a really big question mark. He looked terrible last time out, didn't play well. Overall, he's been a high variance play in the playoffs. And I'll check to see if we have updated run of ownership. By the way, ownership projections are free today on Awesemo.com. But at least the last time I had looked, Michael Porter Jr. was projected to be the highest owned player on FanDuel, still is. Over 50% projected ownership for Michael Porter on FanDuel. On DraftKings, he is projected for a little over 30% ownership, 32%. So with that in mind, he's a very popular play. There's a lot of variance there. We don't know how healthy he is. And just given the variance there and the uncertainty of the health, I think that if we're embracing the variance, we want to go underweight to the field on him. And it's a thing where if he was very low owned, I want to be overweight to the field just because of the uncertainty. But popular play, I prefer being underweight to him.
All right. Oops. I was going to I'll drop the link. I just copied the entire, that's going to break my YouTube. I'm going to drop the link to the free projections, not the projections I just uploaded into my Fantasy Cruncher, but there you go. There's the link to those free projections. Let's see. Hey, someone was asking, so this is an interesting one. Who replaced Embiid the last time he got hurt? That's a moving target because it's been a variety of people. If he's been hurt to start the game, we've seen Mike Scott come in. We, of course, saw Howard come in. though a lot of times he even after they traded, I'm blanking on the guy they traded to the Thunder, but even after they opened things up, they were still bringing in Howard in his continued rotation off the bench. It's a Doc Rivers tends to just mix and match. If there was an in-game injury, I don't think there's a gimme that it goes to any particular person. I would say Howard would get the first crack, maybe it just sort of trying to be in the way of passing lanes and such for Jokic, but I don't think that's a guarantee because we could see it. We could see him, Simmons. I'm sorry.
No, that's Ben Simmons started at center. The last time that Joel Embiid was out, Ben Simmons started at center.
Yeah, I've started crossing over to the other game because I was reading the next question. My apologies. Jokic, Embiid. No.
So EMac's got his wires crossed a little bit. He's an older, like we said, older gentleman.
I've been up since 6 this morning.
I know most old men are, but here, and I know, and it's your bedtime after the show ends. But so the starting lineup for the Sixers. I haven't seen
tip off of the second game yet in the first round.
That is the least surprising thing that I've heard all day. The starting lineup, the last time that Joel Embiid was out, Ben Simmons started at center. Then with Seth Curry, Danny Green, Matisse Thybulle, who absolutely destroyed me that night, and Tobias Harris. So they went with Thybulle in the starting lineup. Simmons started at center. Thybulle got into foul trouble. The game was a blowout, and Thybulle didn't end up finishing the game because of that. So, I mean, with that in mind, if something crazy was to happen, I think Thybulle would benefit the most, but that's not a situation I'm planning for.
They're asking you to take it easy. Hey, I bring a lot of this on myself, so Greg has no need to pull punches with me. So there's no issues. He's had to run the gamut with me on different shows, so we won't revisit those. But yeah, that will never happen again. But he has earned the right to take shots whenever he feels like it. For sure. Yeah,
and listen, the other thing too is I feel like I really have to get my punches in when I do shows because we used to do 2-3 shows together a week, and now it's a monthly situation. So when I'm here, I've got to swing.
And I will say that comparing me to the 179-year-old turtle, that was classic. I even showed my wife; she thought that. She's like, "Oh, that's hilarious. I wish I would have thought." I'm like, "Really? Thanks. Okay, that feels great." I'm just going to go cry in the corner for a little while now. All right, we have 7 minutes to go, so definitely get your lineups in. I'm going to upload mine momentarily here. Let's see. EMac, demand more respect. Don't play the battered wife role. EMac, you have been here forever. EMac, roast his ass. I will say this. I am 13 days away from my 10-year deposiversary over there on Fanduel, Greg. That's some pretty damn good longevity. And to keep doing this and not have to redeposit and not have the wife bitching about credit card expenses or anything like that. Because again, I don't have to redeposit because I can manage to maintain and increase my bankroll. That's a long time. 10 years. Wow.
Listen, EMac people now, I mean, if we're going to, and also a couple of questions I'll answer in a second, but here's the other thing with EMac too. EMac is the OG of DFS content. EMac's been doing podcasts and live shows for DFS longer than anybody. I would be willing to wager that there is not a single person in the industry that has done more live shows than EMac.
That's actually pretty close. There are a few people that probably have come close, but even like Lofty, because he does more. I have like 3 or 4 more years on him. Plus I was still doing a lot of shows and podcasts. If we take Sirius out of the equation, Sirius XM radio, if it's just YouTube and other platforms, then yeah, I'd say there. I was the 5th/6th ever host over on Roto Grinders. We can say that here on our show with one Warren Kasoy. You guys still know him as Bills fan 777. So that's way, way, way back in the day. But yeah, Dan Bach, Beer Makers fan, Al Zeidenfeld, CSU Ram, and Dave Kitchen were the ones that were on air before me. This is a long time. It's a long time.
Hey,
all right, back to today though, because we only have 5 minutes before tip off.
5 minutes. I'm going to answer the questions we have in the premium Slack chat, and then that'll probably bring us right around into lock. But EMac and I, we're not going anywhere. We're going to be doing a 30-minute Yahoo show after this, so stick around because you never know what might happen. Even if you yourself aren't playing on Yahoo, not sure if you're going to play, there might be injury news, right? Maybe something crazy happens, a new starting lineup comes out, and we'll be talking about all that as well. But questions that we have in here from Josh Nork in the premium Slack chat. Thoughts on Gallo on Fanduel versus Danny Green for a large field GPP. And let's see, who do I have for Gallo versus Danny Green? I know I kind of poo-pooed Danilo Gallinari before, but I don't exactly love Danny Green either. So let's see. I assume I have them very close in projected fantasy points. I have a very slight lean towards Danny Green. And so, yeah, that would be my choice. I don't think Gallinari is going to play as many minutes as he played last time out. Do you have a lean on that one?
I would definitely go Gallinari, but I'm counting on him to sink his shots, which is not necessarily something you really want to put a lot of money behind.
All right. And nope, we already answered that question before. So, all right. So that we are all caught up in the premium Slack questions. If you guys have any more questions, feel free to fire them at EMac and I.
All right. I'm just doing one last little mini crunch. I did not get nearly the Kevin Herter I was looking for. I have way too much John Collins. That's a little terrifying. I feel like I'm Chris Baggs from the other day. How do you feel about John Collins going well over the field on DK? Terrified.
I am, let's see.
I have 66%. That feels like a lot. Fields at 41. That's not the worst thing in the world.
Yeah, I'm right around the field with John Collins. I think he's a good play, particularly on a points per dollar basis, 5,800. That's close to his cheapest price point of the season. So Collins, the 41% ownership, that's already, pretty substantial. So, I mean, even like you said right there, you have him in 60% of your lineups. Yeah, that is a lot more than the field, but it's not like he's a 15% or that you have at 60.
Right. All right. Let me just shuffle the lineups, get these uploaded here, and then we're going to stay on for another 30 minutes. We'll be talking single game content. We, of course, will be focusing on Yahoo, where, again, if you use the promo code Awesemo10, you put in $5, they'll give you 10. It's a great deal there. That will come in the form of Awesemo or in the form of YSRPs. Those are Yahoo Sports Rewards points, which are just as good as cash. We are 2.5 minutes out. I am uploading it. I am safe, Greg. There we go.
All right. Iron Maiden 2 is asking Crowder or Curry for DraftKings last guy in. That is Jay Crowder for me.
I am going to lean a little bit more towards Curry. I just think there's more opportunities. Again, you're counting on him sinking his shots, but he is going to be one of the long-range shooters there, especially if they end up with Thibault and Simmons on the court at the same time. I don't think we talked enough, now that I'm mentioning it, Tobias Harris, who should see somewhere between low 20s for shots tonight, I think, assuming Ben Simmons is not going to be taking any jumpers. Last minute thoughts, 90 seconds, and wisdom you want to impart from anything on this first game, Greg. What do you got?
Let's see. Any final closing thoughts? Well, here are, by the way, ownership projections are free today on Awesemo.com. So these are the most rostered players on Fanduel today. Somebody you just mentioned, John Collins, in the mix on DraftKings. We have Chris Paul, Nikola Jokic, Joel Embiid, John Collins, and Bogdan Bogdanovic are the 5 most rostered players on DraftKings. Any of those players, not players that are picking up a bunch of ownership in your lineups, EMac?
No, they're not. No, but I am terrified because I just saw one number. Lou Williams, 24%. Yikes.
It is a lot of ownership going to Lou Williams. He is not somebody I have in 24% of my lineups. That is for sure. So He's Williams,
3,000 even. He's point guard and shooting guard. I'm hoping for 11.5 fantasy points now.
Hey,
which he has not done regularly.
Listen, 11.5 would be more than I have him projected for. So Lou Williams, that is really curious ownership, because here's Lou Williams in the playoffs. How many playoff games do you think he's scored over 20 fantasy points?
This year?
Yes.
0.
It is 0. Lou Williams, his high fantasy point output was game 1 against the Knicks. He scored 16.5 DraftKings points in 12.5 minutes. He played 15 minutes last game, scored 7 fantasy points, 15 minutes. That is also the most he's played in the playoffs. So his fantasy production, each individual game this playoffs, 7, 12.5, 9.5, 6.5, 11, 9.5, and then the high watermark of 16.5. That is a lot of ownership going to a guy who, if he has a good playoff game today, it'll be the first time in this playoffs.
Sometimes it happens. It's been a while since I've done a live before lock basketball, so forgot about reverse sorting my lineups to see what popped up there. But hey, we've got 30 more minutes to go. So we have tip off here. So that also means you've got a couple minutes. Some of the games have been starting on time. This one might come, starting closer to the alleged tip off time. But I do want to point out Clint Capela, the over on rebounds is 11.5. He has 12 or more in 6 of his last 8 games. And then the first 2 games of this series, he had 8 and 10.
So here's in the spirit of betting, EMac, what time will first tip be for the first game here?
Which net? I'm only looking to see which network it's on.
ESPN.
It is on ESPN. Their hosts are not going to talk quite as much. There's only 2.5 hours between the games. It is going to go off at 7:11.
Ooh, well, it's definitely not going to be 7:11 because it's 7:31 now.
I'm sorry, 7:41.
All right, I am going to say
it's past my bedtime.
I'm going to say 7:44, and it's like horseshoes closest to the pin here. That's going to be my guess. And by the way, guys, 29 minutes left to go for EMac and I. We're going to be on here talking about Yahoo, but EMac, what is the promo code of Yahoo? If people want to sign up and make a deposit, how do they go about doing that?
Absolutely. Look at you. Such a professional. You use the promo code Awesemo10. That is Awesemo10. You put in $5. They will give you another 10 in YSRPs. I'm looking here at some of their single game contests. Tonight, they have the $12 contest is the baller. It's $5,000, $1,000 to first. They have a variety of price points here as well. They have a $1, a $3, a 25-cent, and they also have some higher level ones that are in their smaller leagues. These are absolutely winnable. That is the one thing that is different about Yahoo. You are not going against gazillions of players. One, these are winnable. Two, outside of football, you usually don't see those mass multi-entry people come in here. There are still very good players that mass multi-entry on Yahoo, but it's not the usual suspects with nearly the frequency. The other nice thing is because of their smaller contests, a lot of times they will go off partially empty, I guess, or not quite full. This isn't always rake free, but I played a few golf ones today where they were just basically single entry 100-mans. And they went in with, 83 people, 86 people, 87 people. So you're looking at essentially playing rake free. The other thing about rake, or they call it management fees, usually runs between 10 and 12% on Yahoo, well down from the 15.9% on the majority of the other side. So a lot of bonuses here on Yahoo. Let's see. Let's look here at the single game contest. So the Jokic at 50 is $16 more than the next most expensive player, Greg. That would be Devin Booker. So they're scoring here. You guys know it's the same as Fanduel. 3 points for blocks and steals. No double-double, triple-double bonuses. You get dinged full point for turnovers. And they have a little twist here, their own twist. You have the megastar, which gets 2x value over their fantasy points. You have the superstar that gets 1.5. And then everybody else, the star gets 1.2, and then the other two players get regular fantasy point scoring. There is no salary premium for putting players in those higher roster slots. So the default position, Greg, is like, let's put in Jokic. He's going to be our guy at the double up. How many lineups would you have to play before you went away from putting him in your mega star slot, which is the 2x?
Let's see. What is the most amount of lineups allowed on? All right. So Yahoo, the most entries allowed in this is 14. I would have Jokic as the megastar in all 14.
Okay. And that absolutely seems fair and appropriate, because just on the raw points alone, we're going to project him for something in the mid 50s. Then you're looking at Devin Booker, Chris Paul, DeAndre Ayton are coming in as the next three most expensive players, but they're all going to project for right around upper 30s, low 40s. And that's a big difference maker when you consider that you're down a little bit and you've got 2x going to Jokic. So the math says Jokic would be the more popular play. But there's a reason they play these games, Greg, because sometimes the unexpected does in fact happen.
By the way, I want to address, did you see the super chat we got? Because I've been trying to figure out, I've just been trying to figure out, I don't understand it. Maybe you understand it better than me. Reverse
ordering your lineups. Yes, I had said at the end, one thing I didn't do when I was uploading my lineups, I didn't go look and sort it by, I usually like to sort from highest to lowest projected points for my projected points, and then at highest to lowest my player ownership, and then the Awesemo projected ownership, because then it pops out with silly things like me playing 24% of Lou Williams. This is what a lot of Greg and a lot of our other hosts do via the sorting process. You heard them talking about sorting it. They're pulling the information out from Fantasy Cruncher. They're making 3, 4, 5 times the number of lineups that they want. They're putting that into Excel, it is doing the heavy lifting for them. They're putting up some sort of composite number depending on what they want from volatility, projected points, projected popularity, and size of the slate in the contest. So that's something that they have that doing the heavy lifting for. I still kind of play it, technically old school, even though I'm using an optimizer. I like to be a little more hands-on. It's just fun for me to do it that way. But if I'm busy, I don't go look at the bottom of what's happening on my lineups. Generally, I'll make my crunches, move them over to a master crunch. So I'm getting rid of the stuff I don't want. But if I'm not paying attention, sometimes players, even if you've set them at 10%, they're coming into every crunch you do. And if that you're always selecting those top 3 or 4 lineups into your master crunch, all of a sudden they're earned 24% instead of 10%, or they're represented 24%. So that's sort of what I meant on that one. The other thing that you guys want to do is when you're considering looking at the bottom of your crunches or your lower scoring lineups, there's garbage down there, and there's a lot of it. You need to be very, very careful of that. The optimizer is going to build you exactly what you want. The example would be for basketball is if you say, I want 3 uniques and I want this and I want 150 lineups. By the time you get to the end, unless you've applied any other restraints or governors on it, you're going to get some pretty bad lineups that if the average lineup today looked like it was going to be about 255 points, you're going to get stuff in the 170s. You don't want to play those lineups. You're already looking at 30% less than the rest of the field just on projected stuff. Baseball, maybe you could get away with it. It's more event-based sport than anything else, but basketball, you certainly cannot. So
yeah, I have so especially in baseball when there are stacks that I'm playing just for leverage reasons, right? So maybe there's a pitcher who is very high owned, who's also a pretty good pitcher, but maybe not an ace starting pitcher, and I want to get some leverage against them. There's a good chance that offense won't be projected very high. Like maybe it's the Pittsburgh Pirates on a given slate, and that is generally going to be projected way lower than whatever my highest lineup is. I don't really care for baseball. Basketball makes a bigger deal. I don't want to go roster, play a lineup in basketball that's projecting like 50 points less than my optimal.
Yep. And one of the ways you can get rid of that, or you can try to eliminate that, is you can go into, and this is the same with some of the other optimizers out there. Most of us happen to use Fantasy Cruncher. We have a partnership with them where we help support them and we preload our information into it. They in turn give us a slightly, for those that get the Fantasy Cruncher through us, get a slightly lesser, without quite all the bells and whistles, still have pretty much everything you need for regular stuff. But one of the things you can do is you can go in there and say, don't build any lineups that are less than put in my projected points. Tonight I was putting in 240 for that one. I then took it off and was trying to make a few other things with some superstars. That was another issue I had where I got Lou Williams. But those are all the different tips and tricks that we'll talk about in the strategy shows when people have questions. And then more importantly, we talk about this stuff all the time in the Awesemo Premium Slack. And we have a devoted channel there that T. McBee, you guys, Terry McBride, you guys know him. It's the DFS 101 channel. We only invite some people in there. Anybody can come in, but we keep it a little gated, so not everybody comes in there. But it's usually people that either want help, or it's people that really want to help other people. And so we answer detailed questions ad nauseum over and over and over, but it gets everybody a fighting chance, and it saves you from burning through your bankroll, making the stupid mistakes we've already made. And by the way, none of us are perfect. We make horrible mistakes all the time. I did not upload my final MLB lineups 2 days ago when I was 5x the field on the Mets when they had 5 home runs, including Billy McKinney and was that the Pilar double dog day, along with the second day in a row for Pete Alonso. Oops, sometimes that happens, but we try to help you guys out from that one. All right, back to
also sorry, one more thing, because Carlos Manza, who left the super chat before, which has led to this discussion, he followed up and he said it would be dope if you guys had videos on all this astrophysicist shit, which, hey, I think that we should have a lot of evergreen content that's a little easier to find and more sortable. But we do have, if you want to look at some more of the process type stuff, Josh Engelman does do process videos in the morning, where he goes through a lot of his projections, stuff like that, which, I mean, maybe that might fall into the category of astrophysicist type shit to some people. That's something that I'd recommend checking out. The other thing also, though, is that we do have some older videos just on using Fantasy Cruncher that do exist on YouTube. If you need to find them, DM me on Twitter if you're on Twitter, and I'll dig them up and send them to you, because there's a bunch of people I've sent those videos to before, just, about how processes and how to make baseball lineups and basketball lineups and whatnot on Fantasy Cruncher. And I think that's all very helpful.
Yep. Same thing as well. I just dropped in. We have a Learn DFS section, which has written content by Alex on how to approach all the different sports. There are also a variety of links into there to some of the evergreen content for baseball. It'll give you the basics, the mechanics, the stuff that you're like, oh, I didn't know I could do that, which are always aha moments, which I usually still have, every couple of weeks with Fantasy Cruncher because they're always pushing out new features, etc. But those are good ways to get there. All right, back to our Yahoo. I'm going to build my lineup here. Oh, too many windows open. There we go. So Nikola Jokic, we're saying is number 1. I'm going to go Chris Paul number 2. Would you feel, you know what? I'm going to be different on this one. I'm going to go Mikal Bridges number 2 and Chris Paul number 3.
All right. Well, I'm just curious if we go Jokic, like Booker's clearly the second best projected player.
Yes.
See,
so here's the question. So Jokic, Bridges, Paul allows us $20 each for our next 2. So I was trying to leave a little bit of room there because now we're looking at the Jay Crowders, Aaron Gordons of the world, and probably leaving money on the table.
Yeah. So here's the other thing. I mean, it's also viable to build lineups. This is going to be a very chalky construction, but Nikola Jokic, $50 megastar, Devin Booker, $34 superstar, Chris Paul, $28 star. You get those 3 guys and there's still $14 in remaining salary for the final 2 spots. Let's say you're somebody who's playing a cash game scenario for this single game Yahoo slate. That's how I think you go about starting your lineup.
All right. Well, let's have fun with this one. Let's put Dario Saric in there as well. Now we have $18 left. We have people represented from both teams, so we're safe there. That has us with Monte Morris, Jay Crowder, Aaron Gordon, Facundo Campazzo, or Campaign. I think it's going to be Crowder.
It would be Crowder in that case. To me, I think that's probably the optimal cash game lineup.
So I'm going to do that. I'm going to click on the little button that allows me to utilize my YSRPs to enter that. So I'm not using my bankroll, and boom, there we go. We are in on that one. So I should probably put that in a 50-50, right, Craig? Just to see how we go against the rest of the field. Ooh, there's a nice single entry. I will enter it in that. And there is a 50-50. I'm in. All right. Chat, go ahead and ask us some additional questions. I'm going to try a different tact. I'm going back to the one I wanted to go to in the beginning, which again is going to have Nikola Jokic. As Greg mentioned, Jokic is going to be the mainstay of your lineups. He said pretty much across the board. I am not going to fight him on that one, but I'm going to get a little bit crazy here with Jokic 1, Paul 2. Now I'm going with Bridges 3. Now here's where we're going to have to leave some funding on the table. Or even if I go with Saric, I get 31. I could go Saric and then Ayton. That feels pretty solid. We're going to end up if you play Jokic, you're basically coming back with 4, for sure 3, if not 4 Phoenix players. It's the way this is shaping up.
And there's no way to build a lineup that just doesn't have Jokic. I mean, I'm looking at it right now. There's too much salary left over, and he's projected for so many more fantasy points than everybody else. So if you build a lineup where you don't play Jokic, everybody's playing the same lineup after that. It's Devin Booker, Chris Paul, DeAndre Ayton, Michael Porter, and Mikal Bridges. So the issue is, even if you're getting contrarian by not playing Jokic, you're playing the same non-Jokic lineup that everybody else is playing, unless you're going to play like Monte Morris over Mikal Bridges, which is just suboptimal to me.
All right. Another Awesemo odds recommendation here. I'm going to drop that link again into chat. We have this. This is for free. So we have the Awesemo betting props line. It's very helpful. You can utilize this for some of the DFS sites that put up lines and have their various contests. You can also use it for sports wagering. If you are joining any of those sports wagering sites out there, I'm being a little cagey because YouTube gets a little dodgy with us when we use some of the names of those sites that aren't DraftKings and Fanduel because, gambling is bad. But we have, if you come in through our links, we get a nice little hookup there on the back end. And it also comes in automatically loading that link for you with whatever the best ongoing deposit bonus is at that time, unless, of course, you're a VIP of some sort. The stuff you're seeing out there on Twitter, the bet 1 to win 100 or on TV, those are not the best deals. or offers. Definitely check out and see what we've got. We've got ads over there on Awesemo at oddshopper.com. That's one of our Awesemo sister sites, and it'll pop up and it'll just tell you, hey, here's and by pop-ups, I just mean they're the rotating ads for the different banners. It's geolocated based upon your state, so it's only going to show you the ones that you can participate in and wager on, but you can find the different deals that way as well. But we have Chris Paul, the under of 10.5 assists. So let's see where we landed on that. So that was the recommendation was the under earlier. Now that was about 7 hours ago, so we could have tweaked some of our information here. Right now, we still have Chris Paul. The prop line has changed. It is now 9.5. So the prop lines are going to change throughout the day. So if we really should have hit that when it was 10.5 and gone with the under. The lines have corrected the lines have stabilized and adjusted based upon where money is coming in because they're trying to maintain an even one here. So now at 9.5, we're saying 50-50 chance that you win the over. That's not a good bet any longer. When it was 10.5, we were saying it was a 30, the ROI was 39% and it was a 63% chance of it coming in under. But these are the little nuances. There's wild swings. So even though you come home from work, I was going to bet it under at 10.5. Oh, it's only 9.5. I'll bet it now. No, that's right on the line. That's not a savvy play. There are other plays out there that you could get some action on. For this one, Greg, how about for you? Facundo Campazzo, the prop line on assists, 4.5.
That is a very, very efficient line in my opinion. Just it's hard for me to feel really good about Campazzo's minutes with Will Barton back in the mix now. We've talked about this. Barton, impact on these other guards a pretty good deal now. So Campazzo played 36 minutes in the first game of the series, but then game 2 with Will Barton back in the mix, we saw Campazzo's minutes dip down to 29 and 2 assists in that game. So I think also with Will Barton's minutes now going up, I'm expecting somewhere in the neighborhood of 28 minutes out of Campazzo. And that's going to make me feel personally not great about taking any overs for him.
I don't think we actually said the name Torrey Craig. At least I don't believe I did. Did you mention the name Torrey Craig?
No.
How were we so remiss? So here's the Torrey Craig bet. Now I heard I think it was either Spags or it was Eric, might have been Ben, talking about the best sweat you can get, and they were saying the over under on 2.5 points of PJ Tucker. And that was their bet because he's just standing there. He may take a shot. If he makes a 3, you lose. Well, I think the last game he played, 22 minutes and was 0 for 2 from the field. So you would have won. But here is that bet for Torrey Craig. 4.5 rebounds. Over or under, Craig? And I will give what the Awesemo expectation is here.
Well, a couple of things. First of all, I don't know if you saw this. Do you know what time first tip was for the basketball game?
I'm hoping it was 7:41.
It was 7:47, which was that my number?
I thought you said you won. It was definitely closer to you. I thought you might have said 7:46, but
all right.
I'm not going to take that. I would have remembered 7:47 because the airplane, right? When you hear that, you're like, that's a number that it does for me anyway. But yeah, you're better than me. Fine. Fine. We'll just find other ways to point that out throughout the remainder of the show, of which we have 11 minutes left. Back to Torrey Craig, 4.5 rebounds.
That's a comfortable under for me.
All right. Awesemo says 3.22, 80% chance likelihood that he is under 4.5. That is actually a pretty solid bet. This one already started here with Solomon Hill, 2.5 rebounds, over or under Solomon Hill.
Let's see, what would I have said for Solomon Hill? Although Hill also, there's a good deal of variance there just because, we have no clue how many minutes he's going to end up playing. He played 25 minutes the first game and just 8 last time. I think that's a very efficient line. And I think there's enough variability with Solomon Hill's minutes that I wouldn't feel comfortable with either side actually placing a wager on it.
All right. I think someone's rewinding to see what time you checked. What time you said that. Greg definitely did win. I don't think it was 7:47, but Greg did win that one. Price is Right rules notwithstanding, he was still way, way closer than I was. All right, back to Yahoo, which again, I know there's like 400 of you left watching, but jump in. If you have an account over there on Yahoo, today's the day you actually get to make a deposit bonus and not have to be a new user. Just put in $5, use the promo code Awesemo10, that's Awesemo10, and they will give you $10 in YSRPs. I'm going to go do that after the show. It is a free $10. There is no reason to not take them up on that. Plus, it also helps us because they know it came from this show. And that means that they've been, a good move sponsoring the show and a good move going an extra half hour, which we're here for you guys. Yes. All right. What do we got? Push goes to the elder.
Why is this a push? People are saying that we tied. There's no tie. I was closer. It started at 7:47. He was 6 minutes off. I was 3 minutes off.
Yeah, no matter what we take, Greg wins this one, guys. I'm sorry, and I love you all from the bottom of my heart for sticking up for me. I'm sorry, he's winning this one.
You know, it's I don't know if you saw it. Somebody posted this in the premium slash ad. There are some people who've changed their DFS avatars to the Awesemo logo, but also you in a suit, and it says EMac 2024.
I have seen that. That is our friend Awesemo.
Yes,
which is a play on the Yo MTV Raps from way back in the day. Yes, he is actually placed some top threes there in some of the contests. You too can, not the band, but you guys watching, if you use the Awesemo avatar and finish in a top 3 of any contest with 5,000 or more people repping the Awesemo avatar, you can win 30 free days of Awesemo premium content. 2 little caveats that sometimes people don't understand. You can only win 1 of those free months per sport per year. Okay, no biggie. Lots of sports. You can still win 4 free months a year of Awesemo on all the main ones. And 2, in the showdown slates, if it's a tie with 3 or more people for first, you don't get the win, because otherwise we would have everybody with Awesemo subscriptions. But other than that, anywhere else, jump on in. It's a lot of fun. You know, it's a lot of fun, Greg. We're doing this all again tomorrow. Starting at 10 o'clock, we have Ayton and Adam will be on the NBA strategy show. At 11, we will have myself and T McBee covering the MLB strategy show. The main slates are going off at 4. I believe it is only a 4 or 5 game slate at 7 o'clock. So if you're playing baseball, you're definitely going to want to look at that 4 o'clock slate. That looks to be where a lot of the action is going to be. At 1 o'clock, we have the NASCAR strategy show. 3 o'clock, MLB live before lock. That will be myself and Gunbacker. We'll be going through everything for all the slates, all the games, with the exception, of course, the 2 o'clock game, which will already have started. 5 o'clock, we have UFC live before lock. It's UFC 263. Tomorrow, we do have the MMA player rankings free today and tomorrow. And then at 6:30 tomorrow, we got the NBA Deeper Dive with Spags and Terry breaking down the 1 game slate, 7:30 to 8:30, the live before lock, with Eytan and, wait for it, Nerd Ask Greg, bookending his days here on Awesemo. All right, let's see. What else do we have? Do the heart thing again, EMac.
We had a development in the basketball game.
Ooh, what happened?
So Danny Green hurt heading to the locker room. Matisse Thybulle checked in. So that's something that's going to, pretty significantly impact the slate, especially for a 2-game slate, because now we have to expect that Matisse Thybulle is going to be becoming one of the better value plays on the slate, with the assumption that Danny Green, potentially, obviously I didn't see it. I'm doing the show right here with EMac right now, but I did see Danny Green to the locker room. So depending how severe that injury is, this could be a Matisse Thybulle night for value.
Yeah. So all you Shake Milton people, suck it.
Well, no, it still could be good for Milton too, because ultimately there's still extra minutes to go along.
But Thybulle came in. That means he's ahead of everybody in the rotation. Isn't this how it works?
Kind of, except they play different positions.
No, I'm joking on that. But hey, Thybulle, University of Washington, shout out, go Huskies. Let's see here. 5 minutes to go. Every time I give him a chance, he blows it. That's what Erica D says. I don't know who she's talking to. I don't know, but those are harsh words. Someone is misplaying things. Clearly.
Yeah, I assume that she's talking about Danny Green, who, he's hurt. Let me see if I could find out on Twitter what actually happened.
Or is it someone on Bumble? I don't know. Just saying.
Let's see. Danny Green. You're way too old for dating apps, correct?
Oh, good God. I would not ever want to be single again. No, thank you. Although I did meet my wife online, as they say. eHarmony. I don't know if that's a thing or not.
That's the same.
Yeah. No, it turned out we lived about 2 miles away from each other. Of course, I moved all the way across the country to Virginia randomly and had been out here a year. and was thinking about moving back. And then I met her and I'm like, oh, wow, this is nice. This is different. Maybe I'll stick around for a while. And then guess what? We've been married for now over 10 years and I've been out here for 13 years. So there we go.
All right. So I've got video here of the Danny Green injury. I'm trying to figure out what happened. It's kind of interesting because somebody else falls and Danny Green gets hurt on the play. It looks like, yeah, it's kind of funny because the actual play, Joel Embiid falls and people are picking him up, but Danny Green just laying out of bounds. So I don't know what happened there, but yeah, apparently it seems like a potentially severe ankle roll for Danny Green.
All right. I hustle for it. Says he's in Front Royal. I've been out by Luray to see the Caverns. I believe that is out beyond Front Royal, actually. So there we are. Front Royal, kind of, I call it on the way to West Virginia. It's real. Anything west of me is on the way to West Virginia. But it's, I guess, a little south of that. But there you go. All right. There's a few people around here in Northern Virginia. Adam is up in the Baltimore area. 4 minutes to go here. Let's see if there's any other final things we got going on. Please do hit like and subscribe before you guys get on out of here. We still have the 300, the stalwarts that are here. We're going to be fighting our way against, I forget who are the bad guys in the movie, the 300? Leonidas or whatever.
It's the it's whatever. It's the guy with the nipple rings and all the metal on him.
I can't remember. It's the Immortals.
The Immortals is something different, but yeah, I mean,
Tyler needs to chime in because I can't read his lips. No, he's just disgusted with me for not knowing this. I do know that it's based on the story that it's 10,000. Xerxes. All right.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go. People in chat saying that. Gloucester. Yeah, there's Gloucester, Virginia. Been there. Bristol, Virginia. I've been down there too, right on the border with Tennessee.
You know what I liked about 300? A lot of slow motion.
It's kind of like the Matrix a little bit in that, from that aspect, if I remember. And all I remember is it was Gerard Butler, right? Wasn't that the guy who got all buffed up for it?
Yeah. And there was I remember that actually was a really big fitness thing where then people want to do like all the 300 workouts, but they don't tell you that the actors just do a bunch of like TRT and anabolic steroids. It's like, yeah, push-ups and sit-ups help. You know what else helps is steroids.
Do that? Is that how they? Oh, I mean, I guess it makes sense.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there's nothing, like there are, I mean, I'm sure they're not doing, crazy amounts of like substances that are putting their, life at any sort of risk or anything. Like they're not trying to get like Schwarzenegger in the 70s or anything like that. But, they're trying to definitely look good for camera.
Pumping Iron, classic movie. If you haven't seen it, encapsulates the 70s.
Do you know who Kumail Nanjiani is?
I do not.
Okay, so he's a comedian who was, always been chubby for a lot of his career. Now he's in The Immortals, which is a Marvel movie, and now he's just jacked out of his mind. Listen,
I do know who he is, but
I'm sure he's eating healthy. I'm sure he's working out, but I'm sure that there's some Mexican supplements at play also.
He's got like a 9-pack. It looks like it's not even a 6-pack. He has abs going on top of where you should have abs.
Yeah, but yeah, listen, you don't go from that severe of a body trend, and also it's not like he's young either, right?
He's got to be 40.
Yeah, so he's in between you and I's age, and there's a certain age you get where you don't just totally, or you're not totally.
He's
able
43.
To,
wow.
You don't go from a fat guy the first 43 years of your life to totally overhauling your total body composition. So yeah, there's a little bit of supplements at play. Nothing wrong with that. But all right, let's close with this, EMac. We've got a minute left.
I'm a fat guy in a little coat. Yeah.
I was gonna make it gambling related. We have the Denver Nuggets favored by 2 points net against the Phoenix Suns. If you had to make a play on one of those sides, do you prefer the Nuggets or the Suns getting the points?
I am going to take the Nuggets. I think because they are at home, we've seen time and time again the series switches. They get down, the home team just gets down to business. And if they are going to win anything, it will be tonight. I did pick them in 6 to win the series. I figured it was very, very close. I did not think it would go a game 7, but I also thought they would probably get one of them in Phoenix, which they did not. And Phoenix has won convincingly in both these games. Chris Paul has done a hell of a job. I also had to put in my tipping picks before we knew his shoulder was much, much better, but that doesn't really matter. Even all that, knowing he's relatively healthy, I'm still going to go with Denver tonight because it is in Denver.
Hey, listen, I'm a mark for the Suns. I have a whole bunch of futures on the Suns. Give me Phoenix, and there's a lot of bias baked in there. But yeah, I personally don't have a bet on either side if I had to, which there's no situation where somebody says you have to bet a side, but I would take Phoenix and the 2 points.
Excellent. All right. Well, with that, we're going to get on out of here one last time at the Awesemo 10, Awesemo 10 promo code over there. Ends tonight on Yahoo. Put in $5, get another 10 from them, and their Yahoo Sports rewards points, which are just as good as cash, can be available for immediate use into any contest. We are going to be back at it again tomorrow, 10 a.m. You're going to get Eytan and Adam spending 1 hour covering one game. At 11, you're going to get the MLB strategy show. And then we're off and running with NASCAR, basketball, NASCAR, MMA, and MLB. All sorts of goodness there. Thank you to Greg for letting me be on the show and hanging out with him one more time here. It's G. Ehrenberg over there on Twitter. Is that correct?
G. Ehrenberg DFS.
Oh, the DFS, which is key. That means you're really good at this. I'm at EMac DFS. And of course, it is Awesemo_COM. With that, gamers, good luck. Shout out Tyler, best producer ever.